when my concubine-born daughter, Qinglan, knelt in my courtyard wearing my daughter's bridal dress. I had just been reborn into the past from my daughter's mourning hall in my previous life, back to this very moment. Mother, young Lord Xiao and I have long been in love with each other. Please give me elder sister's marriage. In my previous life, Qinglan had knelt before me in exactly the same way. Furious, I slapped her twice, locked her in the ancestral hall, and fought with everything I had to preserve Lu Yining's betrothal to Xiao Xian, the heir of the Marquise of Ningyuan. Everyone praised me for knowing what truly mattered. They said Yining must have accumulated blessings over several lifetimes to marry into the Marquise's household. But less than a year after the wedding, what came back to me was a flimsy coffin bearing my daughter home. She was only 19 when she died. Along with the coffin came a letter soaked through with blood, containing a single sentence. Mother, if there is another life, I would rather never marry at all. Before Yining's body was even cold, Xiao Xian brought Lu Qinglan into the Marquis's household. Only then did I understand that the marriage I had fought so desperately to preserve for my daughter had never been a good match at all. Now, in this life, Qinglan was once again crying and begging me to let her have the marriage. Everyone in the room waited for me to lose my temper. Instead, I smiled. All right, Qinglan froze. With my own hands, I picked up the scarlet bridal dress that had originally been prepared for Yining and dressed Qinglan in it layer by layer. Finally, I lowered the red bridal veil over her head. If you want to marry him so badly, Mother will make sure you marry into that household in grand style. In my previous life, I had been afraid she would steal the marriage. In this life, I was only afraid she would not. If she wants to steal it, I'll give it to her. The moment I agreed to give her what she wanted, the entire courtyard became so quiet that you could have heard a needle drop. Qinglan was still kneeling in front of me. She had even forgotten to cry. She had probably prepared a whole set of arguments. How she would make extreme threats against her own well-being, how she would accuse me of favoring my legitimate daughter, and how she and Xiao Xian were truly in love. But she had never imagined that I would answer with one simple word, yes. The first person to recover was her biological mother, Concubine Lu. Madam, Concubine Lu stared at me suspiciously. You truly agree? I smiled. Why wouldn't I? Qinglan has already put on Yining's bridal dress. As her mother, am I supposed to tear apart a pair of lovers? Instead of looking pleased, Concubine Lu grew wary. She had lived under my roof for more than 10 years and knew my temperament. Yining's marriage to Xiao Xian had been personally arranged by my late husband while he was alive. The two families were well matched in status. Xiao Xian was also the Marquis of Ningyuan's only son. Barring an accident, he would inherit the title in the future. In my previous life, to preserve this marriage that everyone envied, I had nearly fallen out completely with Qinglan. It was only natural that they would suspect me now that I had suddenly yielded. Qinglan bit her lip. Mother, are you only saying this to trick me into getting up, then planning to lock me in the ancestral hall again? I lowered my eyes to her. If you don't believe me, you can choose not to marry him. Her expression changed at once. No, I want to marry him, I nodded. Then get up. She hesitated, but finally took her maid's hand and rose. At that moment, a man's voice came from outside the courtyard. Since Aunt has already agreed, this is the perfect time to settle everything clearly. I looked up. Xiao Xian had arrived. He wore fine brocade and stood tall and elegant, exactly as he had in my previous life. That handsome face had once made countless young women in the capital envy my daughter's good fortune. But when I looked at him now, all I could see was Yining's flimsy coffin. She had entered the Marquis's household with a magnificent bridal procession stretching for miles. When she was sent back, there had been nothing but a coffin. Xian walked to Lu Qinglan's side and, in full view of the servants in my courtyard, took her hand. Aunt, this isn't Qinglan's fault. I am the one who loves her. Qinglan's eyes immediately reddened. Cheng Yu, what a devoted pair. How had I failed to see it in my previous life? One cried, one knelt, one claimed their love was impossible to suppress, and the other swore he would never regret it. From beginning to end, only my Yining had been made to look like the villain who stood between two lovers. I raised a hand. Perfect. Since young Lord Xiao is here, we can change. Xian visibly paused. Apparently, even he had not expected me to agree so readily. Aunt, you truly are willing? I am. I looked directly at him. But there is one thing I need you to answer clearly. Please ask. Today when you asked to marry Lu Qinglan instead, is it your own choice, or did she force you? Qinglan's expression shifted slightly. Xian answered immediately, of course it is my own choice. If the marriage is changed, no matter whether you become rich or poor in the future, you will not regret it? He gripped Qinglan's hand and answered without hesitation. I will never regret it. I nearly laughed. Good. Remember those words. Don't forget them later. I turned to Nanny Zhou. Invite the Lu clan elders, and send word to the Marquis of Ningyuan's household. Tell the Marquiness that young Lord Xiao personally came here today to request a change of bride. If she agrees as well, have both families bring the original betrothal documents. Qinglan finally looked alarmed. We have to invite the clan elders too? Of course. I smiled at her. Marriage is no child's game. If we're changing it, then we'll change it cleanly and completely. That way, if one person becomes prosperous and the other falls on hard times, no one can come back later claiming regret. At the word regret, Qinglan shivered for no apparent reason. News spread quickly through the Lu household. When my daughter Lu Yining arrived, her face was pale. She stopped at the doorway, saw Xiao Xian holding Lu Qinglan's hand, froze for only an instant, then lowered her eyes. Mother, is what Qinglan said true? I looked at her, and my eyes suddenly burned. She was alive and well. There was color in her face. Her hands were warm. She was not the ashen-faced girl from my previous life whose fingers had gone stiff inside a coffin. I held out my hand to her. Yining, come here. She walked over. Are you willing to give this marriage to Qinglan? Everyone in the courtyard was watching her. Qinglan, especially, stared at her without blinking. In my previous life, under those same gazes, Yining had said only, "Father arranged the marriage. I will follow mother's decision." So I had naturally assumed she wanted to marry Xiao Xian. It was not until I received that blood-soaked letter that I understood my daughter had simply been too obedient. She thought I had struggled so hard to preserve something for her that, if she said she did not want it, she would disappoint me. This time I would not decide for her. Yining was silent for a moment, then suddenly looked up at Xian. Young Lord Xiao, do you truly want to marry Qinglan? Yes, he replied. She has always been the one in my heart. Yining nodded, and actually smiled. Then change the marriage. 4 soft words. After she said them, however, her shoulders seemed to relax all at once. Only then did I understand that losing Xian did not hurt her nearly as much as I had imagined. If anything, she looked as though a burden had finally been lifted. I took her hand. From now on, don't force yourself to do anything for mother's sake. She stared at me. Mother, I said softly, if one marriage falls through, you can choose another. You only have one life. Her eyes reddened at once. The Marchioness of Ningyuan did not come in person. Instead, she sent her most trusted attendant, Nanny Chen, carrying the original betrothal document. Nanny Chen clearly already knew about Xiao Xian and Qinglan. As soon as she entered, she said, "My lady said that since the heir truly likes the second young lady, the Marquis's household is not the kind of family that cares only about legitimate versus concubine birth." The words sounded gracious, but I sneered inwardly. If the Marquis's household truly did not care about birth status, why had they refused so adamantly to cancel Yining's marriage in my previous life? It did not matter. All I wanted today was their agreement. The clan elders, matchmaker, and stewards from both households were all present. I had a new document written. The first clause stated that the betrothal between Lu Yining and Xiao Xian was dissolved by mutual agreement from that day onward. The second stated that Xiao Xian was voluntarily asking to marry Lu Qinglan, with no involvement or responsibility on anyone else's part. The third stated that, after marriage, whether they became rich or poor, they would bear the consequences themselves and could never use the former betrothal as an excuse to trouble Lu Yining. When Xiao Xian read the third clause, his brow tightened. "Aunt, aren't you thinking too much?" I smiled. "You were just saying you would never regret this." "What? Now you don't even dare sign your name?" Qinglan immediately looked at him, perhaps afraid she would doubt him. Xiao Xian picked up the brush at once. "Why wouldn't I dare?" He signed and pressed his seal. Qinglan followed, signing her own name. Nanny Chen witnessed the document on behalf of the Marquis of Ningyuan's household. The Lu clan elder affixed the clan seal. I signed last. With that, the marriage that had once belonged to Yining was completely gone. I looked at the newly written agreement and, for the first time, truly felt relieved. In my previous life, I had fought desperately to preserve that net and had personally sent my daughter into it. In this life, since Qinglan wanted it so badly, she could enjoy it alone. Once everything was settled, concubine Liu could no longer hide her delight. She moved closer to me. "Madam, now that the marriage has been changed, shouldn't the dowry be rearranged as well?" I took an unhurried sip of tea. Naturally. Her smile grew even warmer. "Most of eldest young lady's 64 loads of dowry have already been prepared. Since the wedding date is unchanged, it would be troublesome to prepare everything again. So perhaps, who said it would be troublesome?" I looked up. She froze. "Move all of Yining's dowry back to her courtyard," I ordered the steward. Her maternal family left her 8 shops and 2 estates. I also prepared 100,000 taels of silver as her private reserve, seal every bit of it. Not one thing is to be missing. Qinglan shot to her feet. Mother, what about mine? I looked at her. The household's standard dowry for a concubine daughter is 24 loads. It will remain 24. Her face flushed bright red. 24? Elder sister has 64. Why do I get only 24? I stared at her in genuine surprise. Because the extra 40 loads are not common property of the Liu household. They come from my own dowry and from Yining's maternal Gu family. You want to take Yining's marriage, and that is something I can decide. Are you planning to take the Gu family's property too? Qinglan had no answer. Concubine Liu grew anxious. But Qinglan is the one marrying the heir of the Marquis of Ningyuan now. With only 24 loads of dowry, what will the Marquis's household think of her? I nodded. You have a point. Concubine Liu brightened. Then I turned to her. Aren't you her biological mother? If you think it's too little, add more yourself. The smile on Concubine Liu's face froze completely. I rose. She begged for this marriage herself. Surely you don't expect me, her legal mother, to empty my own dowry to increase hers. There is no rule that says I must do that. Qinglan bit her lip hard. At last she gave a cold laugh. Once I become the Marchioness of Ningyuan, do you think I'll still care about those things? I smiled and nodded. Good. Since you don't care about them, don't come asking for them later. When Xian left, his expression was no longer as pleasant as when he had arrived. Nanny Chen, too, kept glancing at the dowry list, showing only 24 loads. At the gate, she finally could not help turning back. Madame Liu, I have one more matter to ask on behalf of my lady. I raised my eyes. Go ahead. Nanny Chen chose her words carefully. When the household was originally arranging the marriage with eldest young lady, we heard that her maternal family had left her property of her own. Besides the 8 shops, there is also money deposited with the Gu family banking house. Now that only the bride is changing, she smiled. Will those assets also follow this marriage and enter the Marquis's household with second young lady? The entire courtyard fell silent. My hand paused around my teacup, so that was it. The marriage document had barely been changed. Yet the Marquis of Ningyuan's household cared first not about the new bride, not about the difference between legitimate and concubine birth, and not even about the supposedly mutual love Xiao Xian kept talking about. They cared about money. I slowly raised my head and looked at Nanny Chen, then suddenly smiled. There were things from my previous life that I had never understood, even up to the moment I died. Now at last, the first loose thread had appeared. You stole the marriage. Earn your own dowry. Nanny Chen's smile stiffened at how readily I answered her. Madame Liu, I only mean that those properties were originally prepared in connection with the marriage between our two households. Now that the bride has simply been changed, who told you they were prepared for the marriage? I set down my teacup. The 8 shops and 2 estates were left to Yining by her maternal grandfather. The silver in the Gu family banking house was given to her by her maternal grandmother as her private reserve. Those things belonged to the Gu family, and they were given to Liu Yining. If she marries Xiao Xian, they are hers. If she does not marry Xiao Xian, they are still hers. Nanny Chen's face darkened at my words. Xian finally spoke as well. Aunt is simply worried about Qinglan. He took Qinglan's hand. I am marrying her for who she is. I don't care how much dowry she brings. Qinglan's eyes lit up at once. Cheng Yu, everyone in the courtyard had heard him. I smiled and nodded. Well said, young Lord Xiao. Nanny Zhou, remember that. Young Lord Xiao does not care about dowry. Xian's expression stiffened slightly. I continued, so in the future, don't come knocking on the Liu family's door, because you need silver. 7 days later came the wedding. Before dawn, Liu Qinglan's courtyard was already ablaze with lamps. When I arrived, concubine Liu was personally combing her daughter's hair. The girl in the mirror was radiant with happiness. The moment she saw me, Liu Qinglan instinctively straightened her back. Even now, she probably still did not quite believe I would truly let her marry. Mother, she changed into the bridal dress I had the servants bring in. This time, it was not the dress she had secretly put on to provoke us. It was the real wedding dress, embroidered with gold thread and prepared for the bridal sedan. I walked behind her and helped her put it on, layer by layer. In my previous life, the person who wore this dress had been Yining. Back then, as I straightened my daughter's collar, I had smiled and told her, the Marquis of Ningyuan's household has an upright family tradition, and Xiao Xian is a steady young man. Once you marry there, mother can finally stop worrying. 1 year later, all I received back was a coffin. Thinking of it now, every time I had said stop worrying in that life felt like a slap across my own face. Mother, Qinglan suddenly said. I returned to my senses. She looked at me through the bronze mirror. Do you regret it? I smiled faintly. Why would I? Elder sister may never find another marriage as good as the Xiao family's. The corners of her mouth lifted despite herself. If Chengyu did not truly love me, a match like this would have been beyond the reach of a concubine-born daughter like me. Concubine Liu scolded her from the side. Today is your wedding day. Why say things like that? Her words were reproachful, but she could not hide the pride on her face. I fastened the last gold hairpin into Qinglan's hair. You're right. It is such a wonderful marriage. I looked at her reflection. You must live well after you marry. She smiled. Of course I will. I won't be like elder sister and fail to appreciate my good fortune. Before she could finish, a voice came from the doorway. Younger sister. Yining had arrived. She wore a simple moon-white gown and carried the red bridal veil in her hands. Qinglan looked even more pleased when she saw her. Elder sister, did you come to see me off? Yining nodded. Qinglan took the veil but did not put it on immediately. Instead, she asked, Elder sister, do you truly not blame me? After all, today was originally supposed to be your wedding day. Everyone in the room fell silent. I looked at my daughter. Yining merely smiled. You can steal a marriage, but you can't steal someone's heart. Since young Lord Xiao likes you, why would I blame you? Qinglan's smile faded a little. She had probably wanted to see Yining furious and unwilling to let go. Instead, Yining was completely calm. In the end, Yining said only, Then I hope you get exactly what you wished for. My heart softened as I looked at my daughter. How had I failed to notice in my previous life that she had never truly been reluctant to part with Xian? The one who had been unable to let go was me, her self-righteous mother. Qinglan's dowry remained exactly 24 loads, no more and no less. Concubine Liu still thought it looked shabby, so she added 2 boxes of jewelry and fabric from her own private savings. When the bridal procession left, Concubine stood beside me, watching the long line of attendants and the sedan chair, her eyes red from crying. Madam, Qinglan will be the wife of the Marquis's heir from now on. If Masters were still alive and knew she had married so well, he would certainly be happy. I did not answer. I only watched the bridal sedan grow smaller in the distance. In my previous life, I had sent Yining away in exactly the same way. I had even followed her procession all the way to the main gate. This time I did not take a single step after it. I said only in my heart, Lu Qinglan, you stole this road for yourself. From here on, you will have to walk it yourself. 3 days later, when the newlyweds returned to the bride's family, Lu Qinglan arrived a full hour earlier than etiquette required. The moment I saw her, I smiled. She had been married for only 3 days. Before the wedding, her face had been bright with triumph. Now there were already faint shadows beneath her eyes. Xian still looked every inch the elegant young heir, but when he saw me, the easy composure he had shown 7 days earlier was gone. After the meal, Qinglan predictably could not sit still any longer. Mother, I would like to discuss something with you. Go on. She bit her lip. Could my dowry be increased a little? I raised an eyebrow. You think 24 loads are too few? Her face reddened. It isn't that I think it's too little. My mother-in-law said that if the wife of the Marquis's heir has only 24 loads of dowry, outsiders will laugh. Besides, many of the Marquis's household businesses need capital right now. If I had a few shops in my name, it would be easier for me to manage the household later. Before I could answer, Xian cut in. Aunt, Qinglan represents the Liu family's dignity now. If her dowry is too thin, outsiders will laugh at both families. I looked at him. Young Lord Xiao, what did you say 6 days ago? He faltered, so I reminded him. You said you were marrying Qinglan herself and did not care how much dowry she had. Have you forgotten after only 3 days of marriage? Xian's expression soured. Naturally, I am not coveting her dowry, it's only good. I cut him off directly. Then there is nothing more to discuss. Qinglan grew anxious. But elder sister's shops are just sitting there unused. Yining, who was seated beside me, raised her head at that. Qinglan continued, Elder sister doesn't even have a marriage now. What use is it to leave those shops in her name? My gaze went completely cold. If a woman is unmarried, she cannot own shops? Is that what you mean? A woman's property is useful only if she takes it to support her husband's family? Qinglan flushed under my questions. That isn't what I meant. Then what did you mean? She could not answer. So I made it perfectly clear. Lu Qinglan, what you took from Yining was the man she was betrothed to, not her life. Her money and her shops are hers. Whatever she chooses to do in the future has nothing to do with you. As for you, I glanced at Xiao. Since you chose such a wonderful husband for yourself, live well with him. If you need silver, husband and wife can earn it together. As your legal mother, I cannot be expected to live your married life for you as well. Xian's face darkened completely. Qinglan's eyes reddened. Mother, must you really be this heartless? You were the one who begged for this marriage. How has it suddenly become my heartlessness? That one sentence left her speechless. In the end, Xian left with her, his face grim. I watched their backs and noticed one thing. From beginning to end, the man who had repeatedly declared that he would marry no one but Qinglan never once said, "I'll find a way to solve the money problem." After they left, Yining did not return to her courtyard. She followed me all the way to the study. "Mother, what is it?" She took a neatly folded sheet of paper from her sleeve and placed it before me. I opened it and discovered that it was the announcement for this year's selection examination for female officials. The court had newly created posts such as registrar and record keeper and would select women from respectable families in the capital by examination. Marriage status did not matter. The examination tested literacy, arithmetic, statutes, and official document work. I stared at her. "You want to take it?" Yining looked nervous. "I have liked arithmetic since I was little. When my maternal grandfather taught me to read accounts, he used to say that if I were a boy, I could have helped him manage the banking house long ago." Her voice grew softer as she continued. "Before I was betrothed, I knew the Marquis's household would not like their future heir's wife going out to serve as a female official, so I never dared think about it. But now," she looked up at me. "Mother, may I try?" My eyes suddenly stung. In my previous life, I had exhausted myself preserving a marriage for my daughter, believing I was securing her future. I had never once asked what kind of future she wanted for herself. I folded the announcement and placed it back into her hands. "Go." Yining froze. I smiled. "If you don't pass this year, take it again next year. If you still don't pass next year, come home and help Mother manage the shops." "Mother," I took her hand. "Your life is still long. Whichever road you want to take, choose it yourself." Tears fell from Yining's eyes at once, but this time she was crying with a smile. That afternoon, Manager Qi from the Gu family banking house suddenly arrived. He did not even stop for tea before pulling a loan contract from inside his robe. "Is eldest young lady here?" My heart tightened. Yining looked at him in confusion as well. Manager Qi spread the contract on the table. "This afternoon, someone came to the banking house with eldest young lady's seal and said she wished to pledge 4 shops under her name as collateral for a loan of 120,000 taels. My eyes immediately fell to the bottom of the agreement. Beneath Lu Yining's name was a vermilion private seal. At first glance, it looked exactly like the one Yining normally used. I looked up. Where is the man? The sum was too large for me to approve on my own. I told him the silver would be ready in 3 days and sent him away for now. Yining's face went white. "Mother, I never borrowed any money. My seal has been in my room the entire time." She immediately sent a maid to fetch it. When the genuine and false seals were placed side by side, there was only the slightest difference in the final line of the pattern. "It's fake." I stared at the contract for 120,000 taels. The marriage had already been changed. Yining had never even stepped through the gates of the Marquis of Ningguan's household. Yet people from that household were still using her name to obtain money. I suddenly remembered what Nanny Chen had asked before she left. Would the money in the Gu family banking house follow the marriage as well? So from the very beginning, what they had been watching was never which daughter married Xiao Xian. I slowly folded the forged loan agreement and looked at Manager Qi. "Have the silver ready. Aren't they coming back for it in 3 days? Manager Qi paused. "Madam means," I smiled. "Let them reach for it. If they don't show their hand, how will I know who is trying to cut mine off? You stole the marriage and still want to steal my daughter's money." 3 days later, I took Yining to the Gu family banking house. Manager Qi had cleared a private room on the 2nd floor in advance. From the window, we had a perfect view of the counter below. Not long after mid-morning, a man in his 40s entered. "Manager Qi, is the 120,000 taels ready?" Manager Qi greeted him with a smile. "Naturally. It's simply such a large amount that I must ask you to verify the documents once more." The man had clearly come prepared. He produced the loan agreement, Lu Yining's private seal, and even a copy of the old betrothal document from when she had originally been promised to Xiao Xian. Manager Qi remained calm. "This money is for eldest young lady Lu? Of course. What will it be used for?" The man frowned. "Your banking house lends silver, and you still ask what the owner intends to do with it." Manager Qi smiled apologetically. 120,000 taels is no small sum. We need to leave a note in the accounts. Impatiently, the man pulled a slip from his sleeve. "Is this enough?" Manager Qi took it. From upstairs, I could read the few words written on it clearly. "Purchase grain. Northern Granary." My heart gave an uneasy jump. Manager Qi had already looked up. "Men." The man's expression changed. "What is the meaning of this?" 4 clerks instantly blocked the entrance. I brought Yining downstairs. The moment the man saw me, all the color drained from his face. Madame Lu, I stopped in front of him. You recognize me? He instinctively stepped backward, and in doing so exposed a token at his waist. The token belonged to the Marquis of Ningyuan's household. I smiled. So you're from the Xiao family. He hurriedly shoved the token back under his clothes, but it was too late. I picked up the loan contract. Who sent you? No one. It was eldest young lady herself, Yining. At my call, my daughter stepped beside me and drew her genuine seal from her sleeve. She pressed it onto a blank piece of paper. The two seals were placed together. From a distance they looked almost identical, but up close one could see that the cloud pattern beneath the final character was half an inch shorter on the forged seal. Sweat immediately broke out on the man's forehead. I looked at him. Do you still want to claim Yining sent you? Forging another person's seal to obtain 120,000 taels, Manager Qi. I think we should report this to the authorities. The man dropped to his knees with a thud. Madam, you can't report it. The heir ordered me to do it. Yining's fingers clenched sharply. I was not surprised in the slightest. Where did the forged seal come from? It was copied from the old betrothal document. Just as I had thought. When the two households arranged the original marriage, Yining had placed her private seal on the betrothal papers. The engagement had been dissolved, but the copy preserved by the mark of Ningyuan's household was still in Xiao Xian's possession. He had actually used it as a model to copy my daughter's seal. I asked, what is the 120,000 taels for? The man's eyes shifted. I don't know. I turned to Manager Qi. Report. No. The man panicked completely. The heir only said it was to buy grain. I truly don't know anything else. Where is the grain going? He looked at the slip of paper and his voice dropped lower and lower. The northern granary. I stared at him. Why does the Marquis of Ningyuan's household need to spend 120,000 taels buying grain for the northern granary? I don't know. This time, no matter how we questioned him, he insisted he knew nothing more. I did not press further. I made him give a written statement and put his thumbprint on it. I did not send him to the authorities for the moment. There was no point in arresting a mere errand runner now. What truly concerned me was the northern granary. The moment we returned to the Lu residence, Lu Qinglan arrived. The Marquis's household had clearly already received word. She did not even bother with the customary return-home visit before rushing in. Mother, what did you do to Steward Wang? I looked at her. News travels quickly. He belongs to the Marquis's household. So? I threw the forged loan agreement in front of her. Does belonging to the Marquis's household give him the right to forge your sister's seal? Qinglan looked at it only once, yet she showed no surprise at all. My heart sank. You knew? Her gaze shifted away. I only knew Chengyu needed some silver recently. He said it was only temporary working capital. Yining, standing nearby, gave a disbelieving laugh. Temporary working capital? So he used my name to borrow it? Qinglan looked embarrassed. Elder sister, you didn't actually lose anything. The money wasn't even lent out. Yining stared at her in shock. I raised a hand to stop Yining from answering. Let her speak. Qinglan apparently thought she was in the right. Chengyu said the silver would be repaid within half a year at most. By then, the Marquis's household will still be the Marquis's household, and elder sisters' shops will still be elder sisters. I asked, and if he cannot repay it? She fell silent. I smiled. Then Yining's 4 shops get sold. After all, they aren't yours. Her face went pale. Mother, why do you have to make it sound so ugly? I'm not the one making it ugly. I tapped the forged contract on the table. What you people did is ugly. I looked directly at her. Lu Qinglan, this seal is fake. Today they dared use a false seal to borrow 120,000 taels. Tomorrow they will dare use a false seal to sell Xing's shops. What about the day after that? Will they empty the entire Gu family banking house? She bit her lip, still unconvinced. Chengyu isn't that kind of person. Those words again. In my previous life I had said the same thing. Xiao Xian is not that kind of person. The Marquis of Ningyuan's household is not that kind of family. And in the end, my daughter lay in a coffin. I stared at Qinglan for a long moment. Fine, since you trust him so much, I'll give you one chance. She looked at me uncertainly. What? Stay here with the Lu family for now. I will hold this forged loan agreement for the time being and not report it. I will investigate exactly what is happening in the Marquis's household. If they truly only need money for temporary business turnover, I will not falsely accuse him. But if it is something else, I paused. You will end your marriage to Xiao Xian. She shot to her feet. Impossible. She had not even needed time to think. I've only been married for a few days. The entire capital knows that Chengyu and I are in love. If I separate from him now, what would that make me? Besides, he will be the Marquis of Ningyuan in the future. I looked at her and finally smiled. So that was it. What she could not bear to lose was not only Xiao Xian. She also could not bear to lose the title of Marchioness of Ningyuan. I nodded. Then go back. And from now on, do not return to me whenever something goes wrong in the Marquis's household. Her eyes reddened. Mother, you begged for this marriage, I said calmly. What? After marrying into that family, you still expect me to live your life for you? Lu Qinglan stared at me for a long time, then turned and left. At the doorway she suddenly looked back. One day, Mother will realize that you misjudged him today. I said nothing. I too hoped that this time I was wrong. Unfortunately, I had already died once. Mother. Yining suddenly called to me. I returned to my senses. What is it? She was holding the slip of paper that read, Purchase Grain, Northern Granary. Her brows were slightly drawn together. Something doesn't make sense. What? The Marquis of Ningyuan serves in the Ministry of War, and Xiao Xian now holds a post supervising grain at the Northern Granary. Grain for an official granary should be purchased with funds allocated by the court. Why would they need to borrow 120,000 taels from a private banking house to buy official grain? I turned sharply toward her. Exactly. 120,000 taels, not 12 taels. Why was the Marquis's household so desperate to obtain such a huge amount of private silver to purchase government grain? At that instant, I suddenly remembered something from my previous life. 3 months after Yining married into the Marquis's household, she had returned home once. She looked exhausted that day. Just before leaving, she suddenly asked me, Mother, if someone uses their own family's silver to fill a shortage in an imperial granary's accounts, is that a crime? At the time, I was preparing a birthday gift for old Madame Xiao and had not taken the question seriously at all. I had even scolded her. Stay out of men's affairs outside the household. Since you have married into the Marquis's family, manage the inner household properly. If a woman pries too much into her husband's accounts, sooner or later husband and wife will grow apart. Yining had been silent for a long time. In the end she said only, I understand. She never asked me again. After that came the coffin. The slip of paper in my hand suddenly felt scorching hot. So in my previous life, it was not that Yining had never tried to ask me for help. I had simply failed to understand her. Manager Qi, I stood up abruptly. Investigate the Northern Granary immediately. Manager Qi froze. Madam, the Northern Granary is a government facility. Our people cannot enter. They don't need to enter. The Gu family has traded grain for decades. There are hardly any grain merchants or carting firms around the capital that we don't know. 200,000 measures of grain cannot simply appear in a warehouse out of nowhere. Check every cart and shipment that has delivered grain to the Northern Granary in the past 6 months. Then investigate whether the Marquis of Ningyuan's household has recently been buying grain in large quantities. Manager Qi's expression became grave as well. Yes. 2 days later, the information came back on only 3 thin sheets of paper. I read them for a full quarter of an hour. This spring, the court allocated funds for the Northern Granary, whose ledgers recorded 200,000 measures of grain received. But all the transportation records the Gu family could trace showed that fewer than 60,000 measures had actually been delivered. The remaining 140,000 measures had vanished. And over the past half-month, the Marquis of Ningyuan's household had suddenly contacted 7 grain merchants in the capital and begun buying grain everywhere. They demanded that every merchant take payment in silver, but leave the name of the Marquis of Ningyuan's household out of all records. At last, I understood what the 120,000 taels had been for. It was not temporary turnover. It was not business capital. And it certainly was not something Xian planned to repay in half a year. They were trying to fill a hole large enough to cost the entire Marquis of Ningyuan's household their lives. I set down the 3 sheets. My palms were covered in cold sweat. In my previous life, Yining had asked me about the Northern Granary in the 3rd month after her marriage. A year later, she was dead. Suddenly, I did not dare continue that line of thought. Because I had begun to suspect that my daughter's death in my previous life had never been merely the result of rivalry for a husband's favor inside a noble household. Qinglan thought she had married into the Marquis's household. I saw the cause of my daughter's death in my previous life. A shortage of 140,000 measures of military grain was not something a few falsified ledgers could conceal. I ordered Manager Qi to continue investigating. 3 days later, he brought me a man named Zhao Cheng. Zhao Cheng had once been a clerk at the Northern Granary, but he had abruptly resigned 2 months earlier. The first thing he said when he saw me was, Madame Lu, if this is about the Marquis of Ningyuan's household, I know nothing. I smiled. I haven't asked you anything yet. Zhao Cheng's face went pale. I pushed the forged loan agreement for 120,000 taels toward him. Do you know what I'm asking about now? The moment he saw the words Northern Granary, his hand shook. Madam Lu, there are some things that can get a person killed just for knowing them. Strangely, that warning steadied my heart instead. My daughter has already died once. Zhao Cheng did not understand what I meant, but I stared at him. So this time, I have to know. At last, Zhao Cheng spoke. The northern frontier had not been peaceful the previous year. The court had allocated a large sum of money to replenish military grain, and the Marquess of Ningyuan had been placed in charge of the matter. According to the official accounts, all 200,000 measures of grain had entered the northern granary. In reality, fewer than 60,000 measures had arrived. Where was the rest? I asked. It never entered the granary at all. The Marquis of Ningguan and his son had colluded with several grain merchants. They reported inflated prices while buying grain cheaply, and some grain was even transported back out and sold again, almost as soon as it entered the warehouse. Altogether, a full 140,000 measures of grain had been diverted and sold. A chill ran down my back as I listened. Why are they suddenly trying to replace the missing grain now? Because the court will inspect the northern granary next month. Zhao Cheng gave a bitter smile. It was originally supposed to be a routine inspection, but I heard that someone has recently returned to the capital from the frontier to report, and His Majesty is paying particular attention to military provisions this time. The Marquis of Ningyuan's household panicked. So they need money. A great deal of money. Where had that money come from in my previous life? For a moment, I was afraid to think about it. Yining's question from 3 months after her marriage echoed in my ears again. Mother, if someone uses their own family's silver to fill a shortage in an imperial granary's accounts, is that a crime? She had already discovered it, and what had I told her? Stay out of men's affairs. Since you married into the Marquis's household, be a proper wife to the heir. My eyes suddenly stung. In my previous life, Yining had already placed a plea for help directly in my hands. I had pushed it away myself. Zhao Cheng suddenly reached into his robe and took out a thin booklet. This is the true record of grain entering the warehouse. I secretly kept a copy. There were 4 people responsible for counting the grain at the time. The other 3 cannot be found anymore. I was afraid that one day I might disappear too, so I kept this. I took the booklet and turned through it page by page. The numbers were unmistakable. The official ledger listed 200,000 measures, while the actual warehouse count was only a little over 58,000. This was evidence. At last, I knew what I had to do next. But before I could send the evidence out, Xiao came to the Lu residence first, and he came alone. I agreed to see him in the main hall. The first thing he said after sitting down was, "Aunt, I was too impulsive about changing the marriage that day." I nearly laughed aloud. He had been married for barely more than 10 days, yet the man who had stood in my courtyard swearing he would marry no one. But Lu Qinglan was already regretting it. What is it? Is Qinglan not good enough? She is very good. Xiao looked uncomfortable. It's only that mother has recently felt that Yining was the bride originally destined for the Marquis's household. Now that Qinglan has suddenly taken her place, some members of the clan have begun to criticize the decision as well. I nodded. So he was silent for a moment. If Yining is willing, the Marquis's household can take her in as well. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. What did you say? Qinglan has already married me. I won't abandon her, Xian said with an air of great righteousness. But I can take Yining into the household as another wife of equal rank. With the corresponding status and ceremony, the sisters could look after each other inside the Marquis's household. Wouldn't that be the best of both worlds? I set my teeth down so hard that tea splashed across the table. His face darkened. Aunt, I have already shown more than enough sincerity. Sincerity? I laughed from anger. A little over 10 days ago, you broke Yining's engagement for Lu Qinglan. Now, barely 10 days later, you have come back asking my daughter to enter the household as another wife of equal rank beside Qinglan. What are the daughters of my Lu family to you clothes, for husband and wife to take turns choosing? Xiaoxian's expression hardened. Aunt, why put it so harshly? Yining has already had an engagement broken. Now the whole capital knows I married her younger sister. What other high-ranking family will be willing to marry her in the future? I stared at him and finally understood why he had dared come here. He believed no one would want Yining anymore. Therefore, he thought I should be grateful for his offer. I slowly stood. Young Lord Xiao, listen carefully. Even if my daughter remains unmarried for the rest of her life, she will never marry you. See him out. Xiao sprang to his feet. Aunt, are you truly not thinking about Yining's future? I smiled. Her future will be much longer if she does not marry you. He left with a dark expression. but I saw the person standing behind the folding screen, Lu Qinglan. I did not know when she had arrived. Her eyes were red and she had heard every word. I did not call after her. I only watched as she ran after Xian. The next day, Lu Qinglan returned again, this time to see concubine Liu. Less than half an hour later, concubine Liu came crying into my courtyard. "Madam, please help Qinglan one more time." I did not even raise my head. Help her with what? The Marquis' household urgently needs silver right now. As long as they can put together this sum, Cheng Yu will devote himself to her from now on. I set down the account book in my hand. Who told her that? Concubine Liu said nothing. I understood. Xiao Xian again. Yesterday he had wanted to marry Yining. Today, after realizing that road was closed, he had turned around and gone back to coax Qinglan. And Qinglan believed him. I asked, "How much?" Concubine Liu's voice grew smaller. 120,000 taels. I laughed aloud. After going in a complete circle, it was still 120,000 taels. No, madam, why should my silver be used to fill a hole in the Marquis of Ningyuan's household? Concubine Liu's face changed. You know? I looked at her. Go back and tell Lu Qinglan this. Xiao Xian has already forged Yining's seal once. If Qinglan still thinks this is merely money moving between husband and wife, then she can provide the money herself. But I will warn her one last time. There are some accounts where, once you sign your name, regret will not erase it. Concubine Liu hurried away. That afternoon, Qinglan sent back a written message for me. He is my husband. I will save him myself. I read it and burned it. I had given her a chance. This was her own choice. 5 days later, an older manager from the Gu family's grain business came overnight with a document. Young mistress, someone took this to a grain merchant in the southern district to purchase grain. I opened it. It was a written guarantee bearing a forged seal from a Gu family business. Beside it was the signature of the person who had vouched for the forged seal as genuine, Lu Qinglan. I stared at her name. The old manager's expression was grim. Second young lady personally signed the guarantee and put her mark on it. The grain merchant knows the Gu family's seals and thought something looked wrong, so they sent it here to ask. Yining was present as well. After reading the guarantee, she was silent for a long time. Mother, she knows this seal is fake? Of course she knows. I told her 3 days ago. Yet she had still signed it. To make sure Xian kept loving her, and to preserve her position as the heir's wife, she knowingly vouched for her husband and the forged Gu family document. Suddenly, I understood why Yining had died in my previous life. If the same document had been placed in front of Yining, she would never have signed it. That was why she had asked me whether using private family money to fill a shortage in the Northern Granary's accounts was a crime. That was why her life in the Marquis' household had grown harder and harder. But in this life, Qinglan was willing. She had willingly plunged her own hand into that mire. I closed my eyes for a moment. I asked the old manager, "Where is Zhao Cheng?" "He has been settled according to Madam's instructions. Send him and the true account book to the Imperial Censorate." Then I picked up the guarantee Qinglan had signed with her own hand. "Send this too." The old manager's expression turned solemn. "Madam, have you made up your mind?" I looked at him. 140,000 measures of military grain are missing. If fighting truly breaks out on the frontier, how many soldiers could die because of that shortage? This is no longer merely a private grudge between our families. We cannot wait. The old manager nodded solemnly and turned to leave. I had not stopped Qinglan from marrying into the Marquis' household. But neither would I allow 140,000 measures of military grain to remain missing, simply because I wanted to watch her suffer. Her marriage was the choice she made. As for the crimes committed, everyone responsible would answer for their own actions. Not one of them would escape. The next morning, the results of the preliminary examination for female officials were posted. A maid came running all the way into the house. "Madam, she passed. Eldest young lady passed." Yining sprang to her feet. "Really?" "Third place in the preliminary examination for the registrar post. Eldest young lady, placed third." For the first time, Yining completely forgot the decorum expected of a young lady. She lifted her skirt and ran outside. I followed her. A crowd had gathered around the red results notice. Lu Yining's name was written clearly in third place on the registrar list. She stared at it for a long time, then suddenly turned and threw her arms around me. "Mother, I really can do something else with my life." That single sentence made my eyes redden. In my previous life, everyone had told her that the best future a woman could have was to marry a good man. Now with her own hands, she had carved out another path for herself. I was about to speak when a steward from the Lu household pushed through the crowd, his face deathly pale. "Madam, something has happened." My heart jumped. "What?" He was panting for breath. The Marquis of Ningyuan's residence has been surrounded by government troops. A distant bell rang at that exact moment. Yining still held the red notice showing her third-place examination result. Elsewhere, the first official sealing notice had already been pasted across the gates of the Marquis of Ningyuan's residence. You were the one who stole this marriage. Why don't you want it now? The day after the Marquis of Ningyuan's residence was surrounded, officials from the Court of Judicial Review came to the Liu household. One of them placed a document before me. Madame Liu, a large number of documents connected to the Gu family were found inside the Marquis's residence. Among them is an impression made with a Gu family business seal. I glanced at the impression. It's fake. The official clearly expected that answer. Then please bring the genuine seal and come with us. Very well. Before I left, Yining caught my sleeve. Mother, I'll go too. I shook my head. Stay home and prepare for the final examination. She hesitated. I straightened her collar for her. The Xiao family's filthy accounts are something Mother should deal with. Your road is ahead of you. Don't look back. When I entered the Marquis of Ningyuan's residence again, it looked nothing like it had on Liu Qinglan's wedding day. The red wedding emblems had not even all been taken down, yet official sealing notices already covered the doors. Servants knelt throughout the courtyards. The Marquis of Ningyuan and Xiao Xian were being held in the front hall. Qinglan was there too. It had been barely half a month since her wedding. The young woman who had left home full of pride, boasting that she would one day become the Marchioness of Ningyuan, now had no color at all in her face. The moment she saw me, she sprang up. Mother! An officer immediately ordered, kneel. She trembled and dropped back down, but her eyes never left me. An official from the Court of Judicial Review placed the genuine and forged Gu merchant seals side by side. Madame Liu, please identify them. I picked up my seal. This one is genuine. The other has never come from the Gu family. A Gu family manager also produced the family's seal register from previous years. Compared against the register, the differences were perfectly clear. The Marquis of Ningyuan's face turned ashen. Xian suddenly raised his head. So what if the seal is fake? Liu Qinglan brought it into the Marquis's household. Qinglan whipped her head toward him. Qingyu? Xian did not even look at her. She is a daughter of the Liu family. After marrying into my household, she said she could obtain silver from her family. She was also the one who brought in those Gu family documents. The hall became completely silent. I looked at Qinglan. She had probably never dreamed that the man who, only a little over 10 days earlier, had insisted he would marry no one but her would push her forward first to shield himself the moment his own life was threatened. No, Liu Qinglan panicked. Mother, that forged seal isn't mine. I don't even know how to carve a seal. Tell them. I nodded. That is true. The forged seal isn't yours. Hope instantly appeared in her eyes, but Xiao Xian's expression changed. I took another written statement from my sleeve. This false seal was carved on young Lord Xiao's instructions. Steward Wang copied the impression from Yining's old betrothal document as the model. He has already signed and thumbprinted his confession. Xian struggled in fury. He's lying. An officer kicked the back of his knee, forcing him down and ordered him to remain silent. I looked at the man who had caused my daughter's death in my previous life and found myself unexpectedly calm. Young Lord Xiao, have you forgotten? You sent Steward Wang to use that false seal to borrow 120,000 taels. I caught him on the spot. Even the note telling him to purchase grain for the northern granary is still here. The evidence was laid out one item after another. The true warehouse ledger, the forged grain contract, Steward Wang's confession, the guarantee signed by Liu Qinglan, and the loan contract from the Gu family banking house. The Marquis of Ningyuan collapsed where he sat. But Xian still refused to give up. Even if I ordered the loan agreement prepared, Liu Qinglan signed the guarantee herself. She was the one who certified that the Gu family seal was genuine. All color vanished from Qinglan's face. What did you say? Xian finally looked at her, but there was no trace of affection left in his eyes. Isn't it true? Liu Qinglan, if you dared do it, then dare admit it. I told you to sign and you signed. You're a daughter of the Liu family. Are you saying you couldn't tell whether a Gu family seal was real or fake? Qinglan stared at him blankly. But you clearly said. You said it was only temporary, just to cover the shortfall. You said once the northern granary matter was over, I would be the future Marchioness of Ningyuan. You also said, her voice trembled more and more. You said if I helped you this once, you would never go looking for elder sister again. Xian's expression changed drastically. Shut up! Qinglan seemed to snap. Why should I shut up? You were the one who said that once we gathered enough silver to replace the missing military grain, no one would discover anything. And what about the 180,000 taels of private silver? Don't you still have 180,000 taels hidden at Qinglan estate? The front hall fell dead silent. Even I froze. The Marquis of Ningyuan's face changed instantly. Idiot! Xian looked as though he wanted to lunge at her, but the Court of Judicial Review official was already on his feet. Qinglan estate. Men, go search it immediately. I nearly laughed. Excellent, the dogs had begun biting each other. I hardly needed to do anything at all. By this point, most suspicion against the Gu family and Yining had been cleared. But Xian was clearly still unwilling to accept defeat. He suddenly cried, "My lord, the person I was originally betrothed to was not Lu Qinglan at all. It was Lu Yining. The Lu family and the Marquis' household had a marriage agreement long ago. Who knows whether these dealings had already been arranged between them before the brides were changed." Before I could speak, Lu Qinglan turned sharply toward me as though she had suddenly grasped a lifeline. Yes, she actually nodded along with him. This marriage was originally elder sisters. Mother, she crawled toward me. Tell the officials that the marriage was originally elder sisters. I looked down at hers and suddenly found the whole thing absurd. When she wanted to steal the marriage, she had knelt in my courtyard saying she and Xiao Shan loved each other and accusing Yining of clinging to the engagement to separate true lovers. Now that the Marquis' household was in trouble, the marriage had suddenly become Yining's again. I asked, "Lu Qinglan, what exactly do you want me to say?" Her face was covered in tears. "Say the changed marriage doesn't count. Say I was ignorant and foolish then. Void the new marriage papers, all right? I'm still a daughter of the Lu family. I'm not a wife of the Xiao family." I watched her quietly for a moment, then told Nanny Zhou to open the box I had brought. Inside were the documents signed on the day the marriage was changed. I took them out and spread them one by one. One stated that the former betrothal between Lu Yining and Xiao Xian was dissolved by mutual agreement. Another stated that Xiao Xian voluntarily sought Lu Qinglan as his wife. A third stated that Lu Qinglan voluntarily married into the Marquis of Ningyuan's household. Below them were Xiao Xian's signature, Lu Qinglan's thumbprint, the witness mark from the Marquis' household, and the seal of the Lu clan elder. Not one was missing. I placed the documents before her. "Qinglan, have you forgotten? You were afraid I would change my mind, so you personally watched every one of us sign and seal these papers." Her body stiffened. I said softly, "Why do you refuse to acknowledge them now?" "Mother, when there was wealth and status to gain, you said this was the man you would die to marry. Now that trouble has come, suddenly the marriage belongs to Yining again?" I smiled. "What do you think a marriage contract is? Something you can snatch today and return tomorrow?" Qinglan collapsed to the floor. The Court of Judicial Review official took the documents and read them. He immediately said, "Lu Yining's betrothal to the Marquis of Ningyuan's household was formally dissolved long ago. The forged loan occurred after the change of bride. Eldest young Lady Lu therefore has no connection to this case." That one statement cut off their last path of escape. Xian's eyes reddened with rage. Qinglan looked as if her soul had left her body. After a long while, she suddenly raised her head and stared at me. "You did this on purpose." Her gaze locked onto mine. "You knew the Marquis' household would get into trouble, so you were willing to give me the marriage. You deliberately harmed me." I did not grow angry. I simply asked, "Was I the one who told you to vouch for that forged seal as genuine? Did I force you to sign that guarantee?" She could not answer. "Didn't I tell you that Xiao Shan had already broken the law by forging a seal? Didn't I ask you to return to the Lu household? Didn't I tell you I could investigate the Marquis' household for you, and then let you decide whether to remain in the marriage?" With every question, Qinglan's face grew paler. "How did you answer me?" I reminded her. "You said your husband was yours to save. You also said that one day I would realize I had misjudged him." I crouched in front of her. "Lu Qinglan, I did give you the marriage. But you walked yourself to the Court of Judicial Review one step at a time." She had no answer at all. Tears kept falling. At that moment, Steward Wang was brought in as well. In hopes of reducing his own punishment, he confessed almost everything, including why the Marquis of Ningyuan's household had been so determined to marry a daughter of the Lu family in the first place. "My lord, the Marquis knew long ago that the Northern Granary matter could not be hidden forever. That was why he wanted the heir to marry eldest young Lady Lu. Her maternal family is the Gu family. Once the marriage was completed, the Gu family's silver banking house and grain businesses could all be used." My fingers clenched tightly. Steward Wang continued. "At first, the heir was worried. Eldest young lady was too strong-willed and would refuse to help the Marquis' household falsify accounts. No one expected the bride to be changed to second young lady." He stole a glance at Qinglan. Second young lady was much easier to persuade than we originally expected. Those words struck me like thunder. In my previous life, Yining had been the one who married into the Marquis' household. She had asked me about the northern granary. She refused to touch the Gu family's money. She certainly would have refused to use those forged seals. That was why her life there had become miserable. That was why she had been tormented. That was why a year later, all I received was a flimsy coffin. In this life, Qinglan had been married into the household for less than half a month. They had not locked her away or beaten her. Xiao had even coaxed her with promises that she would become the future Marchioness of Ningyuan. It was not because Xian loved her more. It was because she was willing to sign. She was willing to lie for them, guarantee their false documents, and willingly involve herself in the theft of 140,000 measures of military grain. My eyes burned. So that was the truth. My Yining had not suffered because she was unlucky. She had suffered because, even to the day she died, she refused to join those beasts in wrongdoing. The officers stepped forward again. The Marquis of Ningyuan and his son were taken away. Qinglan was also detained pending trial on suspicion of knowingly providing a written guarantee, despite knowing the seal was forged. She suddenly grabbed my leg. "Mother, save me. I don't want to go to prison. I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong." I looked down at her and suddenly remembered her wedding day. She had sat in front of the mirror and asked me, "Mother, do you regret it?" What had I answered then? "Such a wonderful marriage. You must live well." Barely half a month had passed and she was the one regretting it first. I gently removed her hands. "Qinglan, on the day you stole the marriage, you said that even if you died, you still wanted to marry Xiao. Mother agreed to your wish." I stood. "So naturally, I will honor that choice to the end. In this life, I will not dress my daughter in bridal clothes." The proceedings in the case against the Marquis of Ningyuan's household lasted an entire month. On the day the judgment was announced, the capital saw its first snowfall of winter. The evidence that the Marquis of Ningyuan and his son had embezzled military grain, falsified accounts, and resold government provisions was conclusive. The Marquis was stripped of his title and imprisoned. Xiao, who had personally handled false accounts while serving as a grain supervisor for the northern granary and had ordered others to forge the Gu family's seals, was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to execution pending final review. The once envied Marquis of Ningyuan's household was finished. Naturally, the future position of Marchioness of Ningyuan, the position Qinglan had fought so desperately to steal, was gone with it. As for Qinglan, the Court of Judicial Review ultimately confirmed that when the Marquis' household first began reselling the military grain, she had not yet married into the family and truly knew nothing about it. But later, when Xian forged Gu family documents to fill the shortage, she knew the documents were false and still signed the written guarantee with her own hand. So she was not a principal offender, but she was far from innocent. She was sentenced to 3 years of penal servitude. After the judgment was announced, concubine Liu knelt outside my courtyard for a full hour. "Madam, Qinglan is only 18. If she truly serves 3 years, her whole life will be ruined." I ordered someone to help her up, but she clung to my leg instead. "Madam, your natal family has so many connections, and the Gu family is one of the victims. If you would only say that Qinglan was deceived too, perhaps the Court of Judicial Review could reduce her sentence." I looked at her. "She has already been sentenced leniently." Concubine Liu froze. "What? She did not participate in the original military grain crime. She is being punished only for the later forged documents. The authorities have already separated her responsibility from the crimes committed by the Marquis of Ningyuan's household. How much more lenient do you want the court to be?" Concubine Liu sobbed. "But Xiao deceived her." I asked in return. "Did I tell her the seal was fake?" She went still. "Did I tell her Xiao was already breaking the law?" Concubine Liu could not answer. "I even told her to return to the Liu household. I said that if she was willing, I would investigate the Marquis' household for her and help her find a way out. But what did she choose?" I looked at Concubine Liu. She said she would save her own husband herself. "Madam, being deceived means not knowing the truth. Knowing the truth and still helping someone do it is complicity." At last, Concubine Liu said nothing more. She only covered her face and cried. I did not make things harder for her. "If you want to send clothes or food to Qinglan, do as you please. When she is released, if she has nowhere to go, the Liu family will not let her starve." Concubine Liu looked up sharply. I continued, "But if you want me to distort the truth to excuse her crimes, that is impossible. In this life I can save people, but I will not carry the consequences of choices they made themselves." Before Xiaoxian's final sentence was issued, Lu Qinglan sent word asking me to visit her once. I went. Through the prison bars, I saw that she had grown much thinner. When she saw me, she did not cry. She only asked, "Mother, if you could do it all over again, would you still let me marry him?" My heart tightened. "What do you mean?" She gave a bitter smile. "I've spent these days thinking. If elder sister had been the one who married into the Marquis's household, would she be the one sitting here today?" I fell silent. In my previous life, my Yining had not gone to prison. She had died. She died because she would not sign those documents. She would not use the Gu family's money to help the Marquis's household commit fraud. Even after discovering the problem at the northern granary, she had tried to come home and warn me. But I had not listened. I had only told her that once a woman married, she should put her husband's family first. My chest began to ache again at the thought. Qinglan suddenly said, "So you harmed me. You knew Xiao Xian's wasn't a good man, and you still let me marry him." I looked at her. "Lu Qinglan, if I had refused you that day, what would you have done?" She froze. I answered for her. "You would have kept fighting me, made extreme threats against your own well-being, and perhaps even run away with Xiao Xian. In my previous life, you did everything you could to force this marriage. I had never forced her to marry him. This time I had simply stopped standing in her way." Qinglan's lips trembled. I asked again, "The first time you learned the seal was forged, if you had stopped then, would you be sitting here today?" She said nothing. "No. I asked you to leave the Marquis's household. Were you willing?" She lowered her eyes. "No. When Xiao Xian came to ask for Yining as another wife of equal rank, you already saw what kind of man he was. So why did you still go back?" Qinglan bowed her head completely. Because she could not let go. She could not let go of Xiaoshan, and even more than that, she could not let go of the future title of Marchioness of Ningguan. She believed that if she helped him fill the shortage of 140,000 measures of military grain, everything would somehow become good again. A gambler always believes the next round will be the winning one. She had been the same. I stood. "Qinglan, the only thing you stole was a marriage. You were the one who sent yourself to prison." She never spoke again. When I walked out of the prison, the snow outside had already stopped. In this life, I finally no longer needed to decide for anyone else what kind of life they ought to live. 3 days after the Marquis of Ningguan case concluded, the final results of the selection for female officials were posted. Yining placed second in the registrar office selection. When the news reached the Liu household, I was calculating the shop's year-end accounts. Nanny Jo was so excited that she forgot to knock. "Madam, she passed. Eldest young lady truly passed." The brush fell from my hand. This time, even I forgot all the composure expected of the mistress of the household. I gathered my skirt and hurried outside. Yining was already standing in the courtyard, holding the official document sent from the palace. This moment she saw me, her eyes reddened. "Mother." I walked to her. "What place did you get?" "Second." After saying that, she could not help smiling again. "Mother, I really passed." I smiled too. "I knew you would." She shook her head. "You didn't know before." I paused. Yining looked at me. "Before you always said the greatest blessing of my life was that I could marry into the Marquis of Ningguan's household. Back then, I believed it too. I thought that for a woman, marrying well was enough." She lowered her eyes to the official document in her hands. "Now I know I can do many other things too." My eyes stung at once. Yes, in my previous life I had not known either. All I knew how to do was choose a husband for her, choose a family of the right status, choose the household she would marry into. I believed I had chosen the best possible life for her. The one thing I had forgotten to ask was, "What do you want?" On the day Yining entered the palace to take up her post, I went to her courtyard before dawn. It was the same dressing table. A little over a month earlier, Lu Qinglan had sat there while I personally dressed her in bridal red. Now the person sitting before the mirror was Yining. She was not wearing a scarlet wedding dress. She wore a newly made female official's uniform in deep blue-green, edged with silver thread. There was no phoenix crown, no gold hairpins, no magnificent bridal procession stretching for miles. Yet after I fastened her sash, I thought she looked more beautiful than she ever could have in a wedding dress. Yining looked at me through the bronze mirror and suddenly asked, "Mother, do I look good?" I smiled. "You do," she deliberately asked. "Better than in a wedding dress?" My hand paused. Then I nodded seriously. "Better than in a wedding dress." "Why?" I smoothed the last wrinkle from her clothes. "Because anyone can give you a wedding dress." I looked at my daughter in the mirror. "But this uniform isn't something you earned for yourself." Yining's eyes reddened at once, yet her smile looked more beautiful than on any other day. Later, people in the capital still talked about the Liu family's changed marriage. Some said Lu Qinglan was ridiculous. She could have lived her own life, yet insisted on stealing the wealth and status meant for her legitimate elder sister. Others said Yining had simply been lucky. If her younger sister had not stolen the marriage, Yining would have been the one who suffered. Whenever I heard such things, I only smiled. They did not know that in my previous life, no one stole that marriage. My daughter really did marry Xiao, and she died at 19. So after being given another life, what made me happiest was never that Qinglan received punishment. It was that on the day she knelt before me and said, "Mother, I want to marry Xiao," I finally stopped fighting to preserve that so-called wonderful marriage for my daughter. What Qinglan stole had never been immense wealth or status. She had simply taken a death warrant away from Yining. As for my daughter, in this life she did not become an heir's wife. She did not become anyone's marchioness. She was simply Lu Yining, and that name alone was already more than enough. Thank you for supporting Panda. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring you more amazing stories. Now, let's begin story 2. I transmigrated here after the original host had already died. She had killed herself by smashing her head against something, leaving a gaping wound that streamed blood without stopping, almost like a fountain. The pain nearly killed me the moment I arrived. Looking down, I saw that I had nothing covering my body and bruises everywhere. When I looked up, a filthy, disheveled man stood in front of me. I did not even need the original hostess memories to understand what had happened to her. The man was still grinning obscenely. A young lady from a noble household really is different. Such fair, delicate skin, and even your moans are soft and sweet. Staying with me wanna be a loss for you. From now on, you'll be the wife of the bandit chief. I stared at him in confusion. Brother, can you not see the hole in my head? When I smashed my head into the wall, where were you hiding? Just then my gaze stopped at a corner of the cave, where a sharp, inconspicuous rock jutted out. I understood. After being violated, the original host had fallen into such despair that while the filthy man was distracted, she had thrown herself against that rock and died in silence. I sighed. Little sister, even living half dead would have been better than dying. Why did you leave like that? Was it worth it? At the very least, you should have taken a few people with you. I raised a hand to cover the wound on my head, and was about to find something to bandage it with when I suddenly felt the injury rapidly closing beneath my palm. Well now, had I turned into Spider-Man or something? Was this the special benefit that came with transmigration? Whatever the reason, once the wound closed, that near-death feeling finally disappeared. I let out a soft breath of relief. Then under the man's astonished stare, I pretended to be shy, rushed over, wrapped my arms around his neck, and whispered, "Husband, now that you've had my body, I belong to you from this day forward." The man grabbed my waist, greedily running a rough hand over my smooth skin. Looks like you know what's good for you. A noble young lady really does understand how to behave. I kept a seductive smile on my face, and lightly traced circles over his chest with one fingertip. Husband, you must be hungry. Why don't I prepare something for you? Once you've eaten your fill, we can. His eyes showed confusion, surprise, and a trace of suspicion. Why, you are really willing? I turned my face away as if embarrassed. My husband is so mighty, how could I not like you? He froze for a moment, then soon burst out laughing and took off his outer robe. He draped it over me. All right, go cook. Let me see what you can do. On the way to the kitchen, I searched through the original host memories, and finally gathered a few scattered pieces of information. This was a mountain bandit stronghold. The original host had been the legitimate daughter of the Chancellor's household, a true young lady of high birth, but she had unfortunately been captured by these bandits and violated. Her name was Ning Chutong, exactly the same as mine. The bandits had appeared suddenly while she was traveling to worship at a Buddhist temple. Their appearance had been far too strange, as if they had known in advance which road she would take and had simply waited for her to walk into their net. There was probably someone pulling the strings behind them. Perhaps because the original host had only just died. I could not extract much information from her memories, but this was enough. Ignoring the probing looks around me, I calmly walked into the kitchen. The bandits all knew their chief had already taken me. From my disheveled clothes, they must have assumed he had stripped me and checked me thoroughly. So they had no concerns about letting me cook. They even told me to make extra for everyone else. Even if we can to get a taste of the noble young lady herself, we can at least taste her cooking. The men around me laughed lewdly. I pretended to shrink back in fear and obediently nodded. Not long after I entered the kitchen, smoke rose from the stove, and the aroma of food drifted through the stronghold. I made them spicy braised chicken. The era I had transmigrated into seemed to belong to a fictional world. Their clothing did not correspond clearly to any historical dynasty, yet ordinary ingredients and seasonings were plentiful. Even in a bandit den like this, I could make spicy braised chicken. Could you believe it? They even had chili peppers. Chilies were not introduced to China until the Ming dynasty, yet these people clearly were not from the Ming while still speaking Chinese. That made it very likely this was a fictional world. The detail did not matter. In any case, the braised chicken was finished. I noticed a glaring contradiction. They had abundant ingredients and seasonings, yet their cooking techniques were primitive. From the bandits' astonished expressions when they saw the dish and the way they devoured it like starving pigs, I could tell they almost never ate anything good. How strange. Who would create such a contradictory world, and for what purpose? I was genuinely curious. After they finished eating, I brought out wine from the kitchen, filled a bowl with my own hands, walked over, and dropped into the bandit chief's lap. "Husband, let me toast you." His face greasy from eating, the chief snatched the wine bowl from my hand, drained it in one gulp, then hoisted me over his shoulder and headed straight for his bedroom. The first time he had violated this body, he had deliberately done it in a filthy cave. Now that I appeared willing to submit, he was taking me to a cleaner bedroom to do it again. That counted as a favor in his eyes. I clutched his collar and urged him. "Husband, hurry, I can wait any longer." He slapped my backside and quickened his pace. The bandits in the hall heard me urging him on and roared with laughter. "Ha! As expected of the Chancellor's young lady. After getting a taste of it, she's even more wanton than a brothel girl." The chief carried me into his room, threw me onto the bed, and hurried to undress. I smiled at him. A moment later, he clutched his stomach, retched and vomited all over the floor. Violent dizziness made him lose his balance, and he collapsed into his own filth. I sat on the bed, counting on my fingers while quietly waiting for him to struggle beside me. He groaned weakly and tried to reach out and grab me. I turned my face away. There was no point watching. He could not touch me anyway. Before long, there was no more movement beside the bed. The bandit chief had passed out. I got down, bent over, and took a dagger from his waist. It was called a dagger, though it was crude and nearly as long as my forearm. This was a weapon made for killing. I tested the blade's sharpness with a fingertip. Once I confirmed it was sharp enough, I raised it and drove it straight into the chief's chest. He died on the spot without even managing a groan. I pulled the blade free, and blood splashed across my face and hair. The force sent it spattering onto the wall as well, staining it deep red like plum blossoms against snow. Strikingly beautiful, the reversal of hunter and prey was a marvelous thing. I flicked the dagger, wiped my face, pushed open the door, and stepped outside. Men lay sprawled everywhere. Seeing me approach covered in blood with a blade in hand, some groaned and crawled away in pain while others cursed me viciously. I paid them no attention. One stroke, one life. I was almost a machine harvesting lives. Only a few of them were still groaning. Most had already lost consciousness. Vomit and excrement were everywhere. Killing them was effortless. When I entered the main hall, I glanced at the spicy braised chicken on the table. It had nearly been eaten clean, leaving only a few small potato pieces on the plates. They must have abandoned those because they could not finish them. I picked up a cold piece of potato and examined it. Solanine is concentrated mainly in potato sprouts. According to the information in my memory, ingesting 0.2 to 0.4 grams could be fatal. Familiar data flashed through my mind. I casually tossed the potato away and curled my lips in contempt. These idiots had piled potatoes in the kitchen. In that warm, damp room sat an entire sack of potatoes, all sprouting. Killing them had been far too easy. The solanine in the sprouts might not have been enough to kill every single one, but it was enough to cause nausea, dizziness, vomiting, even unconsciousness, leaving them unable to fight. The potatoes went first. I followed leisurely behind to finish the harvest. What a perfect plan. I made a circuit of the stronghold and checked carefully, confirming that not a single bandit remained alive. Only then did I return to the storeroom, take some firewood, and heat water. I spent some time bathing thoroughly, washing away the dirt and blood, then changed into clean clothes I found among the goods the bandits had looted. I had to admit, bathing alone in a deathly silent bandit stronghold littered with corpses was a novel experience. There was an indescribable sense of security to it. After bathing and dressing, I stepped over the bodies scattered on the ground, and searched room after room until I finally found the chief's study. I pulled open the cabinets, emptied out the letters and account books, and read everything carefully. Then I discovered something very interesting. There were many letters exchanged between the bandits and Gu Changqing. It appeared Gu Changqing was the person directing them from behind the scenes. All of their actions had been carried out under his orders. According to the original host's memories, Gu Changqing had been her childhood sweetheart. A boy who had grown up beside her had later raised an entire group of bandits and deliberately arranged for them to abduct and violate her. How interesting. The original host truly had been unbearably unlucky to end up with a childhood sweetheart like that. But something was wrong. In her memories, Gu Changqing was merely the son of a fifth-rank remonstrance counselor, hardly the son of a powerful official. How could he afford to maintain a bandit stronghold this large? Someone else had to be backing him. I simply did not yet know who. I searched the entire study, and even tapped along the walls to make certain no secret chamber or hidden compartment had been missed. Then I carefully collected every piece of evidence proving Gu Changqing's collusion with the bandits and carried it with me. Used properly, these things could ruin Gu Changqing so completely that he would not even have a place to be buried. I slowly walked out of the bandit stronghold. Under the clear moonlight, I turned for one last look at that dark, filthy den. Then I turned away with a smile, leaving all its filth and humiliation behind. Next, it was time to go back and take revenge. The Chancellor's residence had already descended into chaos. News that the Chancellor's eldest young lady had encountered bandits on her way to worship and been abducted spread rapidly throughout the capital. The people behind the scheme could hardly wait for the whole world to hear it at once. But how could they have imagined that I would escape the bandit stronghold so quickly? Thus when I entered the main hall surrounded by maids and older female servants like the moon encircled by stars, everyone froze. Chutong, how are you here? My stepmother's eyes widened. The handkerchief she had been using to hide the smile at the corner of her mouth slipped from her fingers in shock. My father and all my brothers and sisters stared at me as well. I deliberately put on a bewildered expression and asked softly, "What is everyone doing here? Why did I just hear someone say that I had been kidnapped by bandits?" Everyone exchanged glances. Then all eyes turned toward my stepmother, because she was the one who had brought the news home. Her whole body trembled. Then she suddenly burst into loud sobs, pretending to be heartbroken as she rushed toward me. "Tonger, how did you escape those bandits? Didn't they say they were going to take you back and make you the bandit chief's wife? They even tore your clothes. You." As she spoke, she looked me up and down. Yet there was nothing about my appearance to suggest that I had been brutalized. She stiffened on the spot. I gently brushed her hands away and pushed her back several steps so she could not block me. "Mother, what are you saying? Have you gone mad?" I went to Dayan Temple to worship, ate a vegetarian meal, and came straight home. Why would you take advantage of my absence to fabricate a story that I was violated by bandits? My stepmother stared at me in shock, but she still tried to drive me into a corner. "Tonger, what are you saying? Mother saw with her own eyes that you were taken by those bandits. Mother, have some dignity," I suddenly shouted, glaring at her. "Your daughter left safely and returned safely without suffering any mishap. Why are you so determined to humiliate me? Even if you have been possessed by some evil spirit, you should not spout nonsense and disgrace the Chancellor's household." By then, everyone understood what was happening. My stepmother's frantic determination to destroy me had exposed her malice completely. Father glared at her in fury and ordered coldly, "Take her away, make her kneel in the ancestral hall for 2 days and think carefully about what should and should not be said. You are the principal wife and mistress of this household. If you do not even know how to protect the Chancellor's reputation, then stop being its mistress." Father's words were extremely severe. Terrified, my stepmother swallowed every slanderous accusation she had wanted to make. She understood Father's temperament perfectly. At this point, if she could produce no proof that bandits had violated me, while I had returned so quickly and in good condition, she could not convict me of anything. With neither witness nor evidence, if she stubbornly continued slandering me, Father himself would be the first person to refuse to forgive her. In the end, unwilling though she was, she let the older servants lead her away and obediently went to kneel in the ancestral hall. Once she was gone, the main hall fell silent. The drama had begun abruptly and ended just as bewilderingly. Many people still did not understand what had actually happened. I bowed to Father with worry on my face. "Father, on my way home, I heard rumors outside saying I had been kidnapped by bandits. How did such a baseless rumor spread so quickly that the whole city heard it before even the people in our own residence knew? Who is trying to smear your reputation?" Father, you must investigate this thoroughly. Father fell silent. His gaze darkened as he studied me for a long moment before suddenly saying, "Come with me." With that, he turned and headed toward his study. I gave my brothers and sisters in the hall a gentle smile, then followed Father gracefully. For the moment I had won this round. In the study, Father sat behind his desk and stared at me with an icy gaze. I met his eyes calmly. I knew the performance just now might fool others, but it could never fool Father, an old fox seasoned by officialdom. He knew very well that my stepmother had probably arranged the entire incident. What he did not know was how I had escaped the bandits and then counterattacked her so spectacularly. He needed the truth. "Did you truly not lose your chastity?" he asked in a low voice. I shook my head. Then how did you escape?" "Father, do you really think Mother's family stopped having any contact with me after she died?" I curled my lips slightly and continued. "Madame Chen wanted to destroy my chastity and take my life. Fortunately, grandfather's people were secretly protecting me. Otherwise, I fear I would never have returned to see you." At once, Father thought of the power of my maternal family, and understanding showed on his face. "So it was your mother's family. Then they cleaned up every trace?" I smiled with complete confidence. "Of course. Father, don't worry, not a single bandit was left." As I spoke, I drew a finger across my throat. Only then did Father finally breathe a little easier. I continued, "I can guarantee that absolutely no news could have leaked from the bandit side. But Madame Chen was so determined to kill me that she did not hesitate to stain the Chancellor's reputation. That part is beyond my control." Ignoring Father's darkening face, I smiled and cupped my hands in salute. "I have done everything I could. As for how to deal with that poisonous snake, suppress the rumors, and restore the Chancellor's reputation, I can only rely on you, Father." The scene I had staged was a complete success. That night, an older servant came to report that Father had gone to the ancestral hall and berated my stepmother, Madame Chen, viciously. He even slapped her twice so hard that her hair came loose. Her hairpins tilted, and both cheeks swelled red, stripping away every trace of dignity befitting the principal wife. Father threatened her with divorce until she confessed how she had arranged for the rumors to spread. He immediately sent people to deal with those spreading the slander and stationed others in crowded places. Whenever they heard anyone repeating damaging rumors about me, they were to seize the person, give them a beating, and drag them to the magistrate's office to answer for it. Not only that, Father ordered me to attend frequent gatherings of noble young ladies, so that I would be seen in public, and prove that nothing had happened to me. Naturally, I cooperated gladly. Thanks to these measures, the rumors in the capitals soon subsided, and the Chancellor's reputation was preserved. As for my stepmother, Madame Chen, she had to endure Father's thunderous anger. Even after kneeling in the ancestral hall for several days and returning, Father did not bother to visit her. For nearly a month, he spent every night with concubine Mai. That was a direct slap in Madame Chen's face, and also Father's way of making an example of Madame Chen to warn everyone else in the residence, letting them know that anyone who dared damage the Chancellor's reputation would suffer a fate many times worse than hers. After this incident, my status in the household rose as well. Father believed my lie and thought I could still influence my maternal family, so he began favoring and protecting me more openly. The servants were accustomed to judging the master's mood before deciding how to behave. Once they saw Father's attitude change, they became even more flattering and respectful toward me. Following Father's orders, I went out often, one day attending one noble girl's flower banquet, another day joining another's poetry gathering. That made everyone see even more clearly how highly Father valued me and further emphasized my lofty status. In an instant, I bloomed like a brilliant spring flower, famous throughout the capital and the focus of everyone's attention. This was something the original host had never experienced after losing her mother, yet now I held it effortlessly in my hands, the very thing she had struggled for 10 years without ever obtaining. In the end, the original host had only been a 16-year-old girl confined to the inner chambers. She was no born genius. With Father neglecting her and her stepmother tormenting her, how could she have taught herself vision, struggle, or political maneuvering? She had been locked into a tiny cage of rules where even her smile had to be measured and proper. You could not expect a child who had been bound by doctrine from birth and subjected to cold abuse to break every prejudice on her own and seize control of her life. Worse, she was surrounded by wolves and tigers, each far stronger than she could ever resist. Etiquette and filial piety had crushed her so thoroughly she could not even raise her head. Her tragedy had been decided long ago. I had come too late to save her. the only thing I could still do for her was avenge her. In the Chancellor's residence, I had only 3 things to do: fight for power, and keep fighting for power. To take power from father, I had to stay close to father because he was the center of authority in this household. Father wanted me to attend more gatherings of noble young ladies to protect the Chancellor's reputation, so I took the opportunity to demand money for the most expensive cloud, pattern brocade, the most fashionable jewelry, and the finest outfits to display our standing. The first time I approached him, he answered from habit, "For matters of the inner chambers, just ask your mother to arrange it." After speaking, he waited a long time, but I did not bow and withdraw. When he looked up, he found me still standing there, smiling faintly without a word. My silent refusal to leave finally reminded him of what my stepmother had done recently. Father was extraordinarily forgetful whenever something did not affect his own interests, which was why he had unconsciously told me to go ask that vicious woman to arrange things. Ahem. He coughed lightly to hide his guilty awkwardness. "How much silver do you need?" "Take father's token and withdraw it from the accounts office." I looked at the token he placed on the desk but did not pick it up immediately. Instead, I asked loudly, "Father, the gatherings I am about to attend are hosted by the most prominent noble young ladies in the capital. Do you know what that means?" "What do you mean?" Father asked. "A single set of jewelry worn by a noble young lady can be worth 1,000 pieces of gold," I said leisurely. "As for clothing, not only must the finest fabric be used, but preparing one complete outfit costs hundreds of taels of silver. Most importantly, a noble young lady's outfit is worn only once." Ignoring father's increasingly ugly expression, I continued calmly, "Every banquet requires a different outfit. Besides the one being worn, 2 more of equal quality must be prepared in case wine or water is spilled. If there is nothing suitable to change into, one becomes a laughingstock." I looked directly at father, smiled softly, and bowed. In the past, I never attended the gatherings of noble young ladies. My monthly allowance was only 2 taels. Forget buying clothes or jewelry, there was not enough even to treat guests to one meal. Madame Chen never prepared expensive clothing or jewelry for me either, so father naturally did not know these things. But now I must appear at noble ladies' gatherings. For the sake of the Chancellor's dignity, these expenses must be paid however painful they are, so I want to ask father, exactly how much silver can this token withdraw from the accounts office? Father had originally intended to dismiss me with a mere 100 taels. When Madame Chen learned that I had received father's token and could withdraw silver from the accounts office without a fixed limit, she naturally could not sit still. She stormed into father's study to argue. Whatever their conversation began as both became angrier until it turned into a fierce quarrel, yet Madame Chen had no valid argument. The louder she became, the more father remembered that I needed to attend these gatherings to cleanse the Chancellor's reputation. And why did that reputation need cleansing? Because Madame Chen had jealously caused trouble and framed me. In other words, every tael father now had to spend was a consequence of her wrongdoing. Yet instead of reflecting on herself, she dared quarrel with him. Father became even more furious, and so Madame Chen received another 2 resounding slaps, and the special bonus of kneeling in the ancestral hall for 3 days. When an older servant reported this to me, I laughed so hard I rolled around on the bed. My personal maid, Sixie, looked confused. "Young lady, why would Madame bring disaster on herself? Could she really have forgotten what she just did?" Holding a long golden spoon, I slowly stirred a small bowl of sweet soup and explained unhurriedly, "Sixie, when things go their way for too long, they form fixed patterns of thought that are difficult to change overnight. Madame Chen has controlled the inner household of the Chancellor's residence for 10 years, and kept the original Ning Chutong, the eldest young lady, beneath her heel for just as long. She is accustomed to standing high above everyone. How could she willingly endure seeing me get what I want and live as a true noble lady? Reason might tell her this is not the right time to argue with her husband, but emotion overwhelms reason. She would rather quarrel with father than watch me live the life of a noble young lady. Human beings were creatures ruled by emotion. Even people who always claimed to be rational were still driven by emotion at their core. I had learned that long before transmigrating, from the criminal cases I knew in my previous life. Even a ruthless killer who could take lives without blinking might choose to surrender because he was afraid of terrifying his mother. Even if a gun sat in the drawer beside him, reason might say that killing the police officer and fleeing left him a sliver of hope, while emotion could still make him surrender that last chance. Human beings were governed by emotion. Even people with antisocial personalities distinguished between those close to them and strangers, so Madame Chen acting this foolishly had been entirely within my expectations. The proudest person was always the one most tormented when an ant once beneath her feet suddenly rose to become an equal who had to be respected. The mere thought of me becoming her equal was enough to make her restless and miserable. So of course she would go make trouble with father. I sighed softly and finished the sweet soup at an unhurried pace. So-called political scheming was nothing more than interests in human nature, that was all. It seemed I had been born understanding power games, which meant that in this household I would live like a fish in water. After Madame Chen repeatedly failed to harm me and suffered setback after setback, her position in the Chancellor's residence began to decline. In truth, the decline was only relative. She remained the principal wife and mistress of the inner household, with genuine authority and weight to her words. It was simply that she could no longer control me. Because of the bandit incident, I had successfully escaped her supervision. She no longer controlled my allowance, my clothing, or my jewelry. Everything involving my food, clothing, residence, and travel was arranged by me and reported directly to father. I had become a master of the household in my own right, so by comparison, her status had naturally fallen. After so many heavy blows, Madame Chen finally panicked. At exactly that moment, Gu Changqing appeared in answer to my summons. When the elegant young man, handsome and refined as a cool breeze, stood before me, a wave of unpleasant emotion suddenly rose inside my chest. I put a hand over my heart and silently said, "Don't be sad, he is not worth it." Yet the emotion would not fade. Instead, it became even stronger. I understood that she was unwilling to let go. I also understood that she once possessed bright, innocent childhood memories with this young man. Gu Changqing had held a special place in Ning Chutong's heart. He had once been one of the rare lights in her dark life. He had represented a beautiful future, a source of hope. But now she knew the beautiful memories were false. The future was false. The hope was false. A young man who had seemed clean and refined had rotted into a black maggot. How could she not feel pain? I understood her, but now was not the time to grieve. Facing him required all my concentration. I forced down the original host emotions and looked directly into his deep gaze. I was not moved. From the original host's memories, I already knew exactly what kind of man he was. He could look at a pig with eyes overflowing with affection. Truly impressive acting. "Tong Tong, does your chest hurt?" He had noticed the hand over my heart and asked with concern. I did not answer. I only looked at him, gradually letting grievance fill my eyes. "Changqing, do you know how I have been living lately?" He froze at the question and answered unconsciously, "Did something happen to you recently?" He did not imagine I could have suffered inside the Chancellor's residence. The information reaching him was that I was doing extremely well, to the point that even Madame Chen had to avoid confronting me directly. So his confusion was genuine. I looked at him mournfully and gently pushed him away. "You don't care about me at all. It has been so long. Yet you haven't even sent a single message. If Madame Chen tortured me to death one day, you would not even know." He did not understand what I meant, but he knew he should follow my lead. "Tong Tong, what exactly happened? Tell me." Summoning all the original host's past grievances, I burst into tears like pear blossoms in the rain. "I can marry anyone anymore. I am no longer pure. It was all Madame Chen's doing. She deserves to die." Gu Changqing's whole body shook. He hurriedly grabbed my hand and anxiously pressed me for an answer. "Tong Tong, what did you say? You are no longer pure?" I trembled all over as I cried and gave a tiny nod. He was both delighted and alarmed. The corners of his mouth lifted, but when I raised my head to look at him, he immediately suppressed the smile. But wasn't the bandit story already clarified as a rumor? "No, Changqing, I truly can go on living. Father hid the truth for the Chancellor's reputation, but I am no longer an untouched maiden. If I marry in the future and my husband discovers on our wedding night that I am not a virgin, what will I do?" Recently the third prince and father have been very close. Father seems to intend to marry me to the third prince. But I started crying again, covered my face, and stamped my foot. "Wouldn't that be deceiving the emperor? What am I supposed to do?" Gu Changqing finally understood everything. Shock and delight mixed in his face as he tightened his grip on my hand. "Tong Tong, listen to me. Why didn't you marry me?" "Me?" I pretended to be stunned. Tears still clung to my lashes, making it seem I had never imagined he would say such a thing. He wiped away a tear at the corner of my eye, his gaze full of sincerity. "Tong Tong, ever since we were children, I have dreamed of marrying you. You are the finest girl in my heart. If the left chancellor agrees to give you to me, I will be endlessly grateful and will never betray you in this life. I pretended to be so happy that I laughed through my tears. Then that's wonderful, Changqing. You don't to despise me. I am truly happy. I knew your feelings for me were sincere. Then when will you come propose? I'll report to my parents immediately and ask them to arrange it. Tong, don't worry. Wait for me. I'll wait. I tugged at the corner of his robe and warned, Changqing, apart from father, only you know what happened to me. You absolutely must not tell your parents. If they learn their future daughter-in-law is no longer. I lowered my head. I wouldn't want to live anymore. Tong, don't worry. I promise I want to tell them. Changqing, you are so good to me. With tears in my eyes, I waved goodbye until he left. Then I casually wiped away my tears and returned to an expressionless face. The next act was about to begin. Gu Changqing had long since colluded with Madame Chen. My encounter with the bandits had also been deliberately arranged by him. Yet their plan clearly had not been to kill me. They wanted to destroy my chastity. That was interesting. In other words, to them, a living me was more valuable than a dead me. And from Gu Changqing's reaction just now, I learned something else. To them, a disgraced me was more valuable than a me with a perfect reputation. Combining those two facts with the role of women confined to the inner chambers in ancient times, I could infer Gu Changqing's first objective. As the son of a remonstrance counselor, Gu Changqing was merely an impoverished young man without any official degree or achievement. He was completely unworthy of me, the legitimate daughter of the chancellor. If we had not studied together in our childhood under a renowned scholar back in our hometown, the son of a fifth-rank official like him would never even have been qualified to stand before me. Class barriers existed in every era. There was nothing new about that. But Gu Changqing wanted to cross that barrier, so he wanted to marry me, not for love, but simply to turn me into a stepping stone beneath his feet so he could reach something higher. Yet father was the left chancellor. How could the left chancellor's legitimate daughter marry the son of a fifth-rank official? More importantly, treating a daughter of the chancellor's household like me as a stepping stone was wildly arrogant. He would never dare reveal such intentions in front of others. He also knew he could not decide my marriage himself, so he went to Madame Chen. He saw how deeply she hated me and knew that as long as I could be driven into ruin and made to live worse than death, she would pay any price. One wanted revenge, the other wanted to exploit me. Naturally, they made perfect partners. Together they pushed the original host toward a dead end. After that, Gu Changqing could step forward and offer to marry her, and his proposal would be much easier to accept. In ancient times, a noblewoman who lost her chastity was not automatically forced to die, but only if she had parents and a family willing to protect her. Ning Chutong had no such protection. So if she did not want to die, marrying him would have been her only path. His calculations were perfectly clear, and that clarity was exactly what I needed to guide the next part of the play. Sure enough, several days later, Gu Changqing came to our residence with his father, remonstrance counselor Gu Chen, to ask for my hand in marriage. The person receiving Gu Chen was not Madame Chen, but father himself. After a month of enormous expenses, clothes, jewelry, banquets, and investments in noblewomen's poetry societies, father had sunk far too much money into me. He had never devoted himself to raising me, but he could not deny that he had now spent a large amount of silver on me. Therefore, he no longer dared leave my marriage in Madame Chen's hands. He feared she would turn all his investment into money thrown into the river. He intended to personally examine every suitor, weigh the benefits carefully, and choose the man who could bring him the greatest return. Only after making sure he could sell me for the highest price would he feel easy. So when remonstrance counselor Gu Chen came to propose, father frowned as soon as he heard who it was. A mere fifth-rank official was far too low a match. Still, father had spent years navigating officialdom and knew how to deal with people. Though he had already crossed Gu Chen off in his heart, he received him politely. After listening to the proposal, father offered a graceful refusal, saying he could not bear to part with his beloved daughter and hoped to keep her by his side for a few more years. Normally, both sides would exchange a few pleasant words about state affairs and let the matter end there. Anyone who survived in officialdom should have enough tact to read the room. Yet after father's tactful rejection, Gu Chen's expression changed. He refused to give up and continued persuading him. Father kept refusing. Gu Chen clenched the armrest and kept listing his son as virtues. After turning him down 3 times, father waved a hand to indicate he did not want to discuss it anymore and said only, drink tea, let us set other matters aside. At last, Gu Chen glanced around. Seeing no one nearby, he leaned closer to father and lowered his voice to say something. The page assigned to gather news from the front courtyard did not know exactly what he said, but everyone knew what happened next. Father's face turned purple with rage. He picked up a cup of hot tea and threw it straight into Gu Chen's face. "You despicable wretch! How dare you speak such outrageous words? You have insulted the Chancellor's household. Damn you!" Scalded by the tea, Gu Chen screamed and clutched his reddened face with one hand, yet he still shouted, "Heaven knows, earth knows, you know, and I know. If the left chancellor agrees to this marriage, no one will ever spread it." He did not even finish before father shut his mouth with a savage beating, then ordered servants to drag him out of the residence. After throwing Gu Chen outside, father angrily instructed the gatekeepers that from that day onward, no member of the Gu family, whoever they were, was to be allowed inside. Then he turned and went back to the study. He began drafting a memorial so he could accuse Gu Chen before the emperor the next morning. I listened as the older servant reported everything, the corner of my mouth lifting while I continued grinding bright red flower petals in a mortar with a jade pestle. Sixi stood beside me adding tea. Seed oil. Wanzi lay sprawled over the table, watching me grind the flowers with fascination. "Young lady, your hands are so beautiful." I freed one hand and lightly tapped her between the brows with my index finger. "All you know is how to look at pretty things." Sixi pressed her lips together and smiled. "Wanzi has been like this since she was little. Whoever is beautiful, she clings to them." I had taught them the phrase, beauty fanatic, and ever since they learned it, they used it constantly to tease one another. I looked at my own hands and thought they really were beautiful. Fingers pale and delicate like tender scallion shoots, graceful and refined, beautiful no matter what they did. Just from these hands, one could glimpse the original hostess' beauty. I had heard that even her looks were not a third as striking as her birth mother's. One could imagine that the original host's mother must have been a rare beauty capable of toppling a kingdom. Unfortunately, in this man-eating world, a woman who was too weak could hardly survive for long no matter how beautiful she was. Madame Chen's jealousy of the original host probably also came from her mother. The original host's existence constantly reminded Madame Chen that her husband had once had a legitimate wife of breathtaking kingdom, toppling beauty. So Madame Chen tormented the original host madly, as if making the girl suffer would allow her to defeat the unattainable white moonlight, the idealized first wife, in her husband's heart. How ridiculous. While the maids teased one another, I merely listened in silence, lazily crushing flower petals while my thoughts drifted thousands of miles away. "Young lady, this should be enough. Let this servant sift the powder for you." Wanzia's clear voice pulled me back to reality. I came to my senses with a start and instinctively handed her the mortar. She noticed nothing unusual, poured out the flower powder and carefully sifted it. Sixi noticed my distraction. "Young lady, are you all right? Are you worried about Lord Gua's proposal?" I shook my head and smiled faintly. "Yes and no, this servant does understand. Father has already started writing a memorial to accuse Gu Chen, but by tomorrow afternoon, he will certainly have his eyes open. Did they think beating a man, throwing him out, and submitting an accusation would end it? Oh, my naive father. Everything had only just begun. The real show was still to come. Soon he would understand just how disgusting the Gu family truly was." Sure enough, early the next day, the court session turned into wave after wave of confrontation and almost became a full-scale brawl. Father had planned to submit a memorial accusing Gu Chen, but Gu Chen was faster. He had already prepared a memorial of his own and wanted to accuse father first. Father was stunned speechless. He had served as an official for so many years and seen every kind of person, but never anyone this shameless. Right in the middle of court, before all the civil and military officials, Gu Chen loudly declared that Ning Chutong, the legitimate daughter of the left chancellor's household, had lost her chastity after being kidnapped by bandits and was no longer pure. He even said no one knew whose bastard child she might now be carrying. Yet father still dreamed of marrying this ruined woman to the third prince. That, he claimed, was the crime of deceiving the sovereign. Father was so furious he stamped his feet. "My daughter has always observed the rules, pure and dignified. Heaven and earth can testify His Majesty is right here. How can you, a shameless old wretch, casually fabricate lies and destroy another person's chastity and reputation? Yesterday you dared speak recklessly and were beaten by this old man. Yet you still haven't learned. Today you dare spew nonsense again. I will fight you to the death." Father rolled up his sleeves and rushed at him. Gu Chen had been punched by father only the day before. So of course he knew father was not merely skilled with the brush but also with his fists. Seeing father charge like a tiger descending the mountain, Gu Chen immediately ducked behind a military officer and refused to stick his head out. Father tried to hit him, but the officer blocked the way, forcing Father to chase him in circles. With the poor officer trapped in the middle, Father and Gu Chen began chasing each other in endless circles around him, like the old tale of the King of Qin circling a pillar. The dignity of the imperial court vanished completely. Some officials stood watching, some tried to persuade them to stop, and others secretly snickered. Only the unfortunate military officer trapped in the middle suffered. No one truly wanted to intervene because everyone was too busy enjoying the spectacle. In the end, the emperor himself had to speak. Only then did Father reluctantly abandon the idea of beating that old Gu scoundrel to death. But immediately afterward, he ran to the steps before the imperial throne, dropped to his knees, kowtowed, and loudly cried for justice. "Your Majesty, please judge clearly. This old minister's beloved daughter has been cherished like precious pearls and jade since childhood. She has never suffered even the slightest grievance, yet now she is slandered by a villain. A perfectly good young woman has had her chastity blackened like this. Is that not trying to force her to her death? Your Majesty. You must uphold justice for this old minister. This old minister has been wronged and has nowhere to explain himself. I truly cannot bear it." Father's performance flowed as smoothly as singing an opera, every word overflowing with emotion. On the final phrase, "wronged with nowhere to explain myself," he even dragged out the ending until the listeners felt chills down their backs. The emperor felt as if his head would explode, watching the left chancellor kneel on the floor, sobbing with tears and snot streaming, refusing to rise. The emperor was caught between helping him up and leaving him there. He could only glare furiously at Gu Chen. Whether the man's daughter was chaste or not, even if bandits truly had violated her, that was still her family's affair. What business was it of this shameless old man? But the emperor could not say that outright before the whole court. Fortunately, he was no new ruler. He could see that the matter contained many hidden twists and could not be judged hastily. Looking at the left chancellor, as shaking shoulders as he sobbed, the emperor said in a deep voice, "A young lady's chastity is no small matter and should not be shouted about publicly. Court is dismissed for today. We will discuss this again later." After court ended, Father immediately returned home and summoned me to his study. I entered with calm dignity, adjusted the hem of my skirt, stood properly, and bowed. "Father, your daughter pays her respects. May Father be in good health." Father waved away the formalities. "Tonger, there is one matter Father must ask clearly, thoroughly, and without ambiguity." I smiled calmly. "Please ask, Father, did you lose your chastity or not?" His voice was cold, emphasizing the words "lose your chastity." I kept the same composed smile. "Number Tonger, if you truly did, you do not need to be afraid. Tell Father openly. Father can still find a way to conceal it for you. Otherwise, if the palace sends experienced matrons to examine you, and they discover you are no longer untouched, our Ning family will be in grave danger." I nodded to show I understood. Father looked at me with both hope and worry. "Tonger, Father will ask one more time. Are you still untouched?" "Yes," I nodded with composed elegance. Father finally let out a long breath. Good. If so, then when the palace matrons come to examine you, there is nothing to fear." "That is not right, Father." I interrupted his relief and said seriously, "Merely because of a few slanderous words from Gu Chen, I, the legitimate daughter of the left chancellor's household, must submit to the humiliation of an intimate examination? Today one man questions my purity. Tomorrow another may do the same. Am I supposed to undergo an examination every single time just to prove I am clean? Father, if we accept such an examination so easily, then even if I truly am pure, my reputation will still be difficult to preserve." Father's expression turned grave again. "Tonger is right." He rose abruptly and paced around the study, the worry between his brows deepening. "But if you refuse the examination, Tonger, how will you clear your name and restore your reputation?" "Father, clearing one's own name is meaningless. Once you fall into the trap of proving your innocence, endless demands for more proof will follow. Never mind whether palace matrons might be bribed or deliberately twist the truth. Even if one of them proves I am pure, what if someone then accuses you of bribing her? And what if that matron is later bought by someone else to give false testimony and frame you? When that happens, Father, how will you prove your innocence?" Listening to my string of questions, Father increasingly felt that the path of self-justification truly should not be taken. The moment a person tries to prove themselves innocent, they are naturally placed beneath the accuser because everything they do is aimed at gaining someone else's approval. They put themselves in the weaker position and hope another person will judge them fairly. That was absolutely not a good choice. Father did not think this through. Fortunately, Tunger is careful and perceptive. Then, in your opinion, what would be the best way to handle this? I leaned close to Father's ear and whispered several sentences. At first, his eyes widened. Then he repeatedly exclaimed in admiration, and finally, he burst into loud laughter and applauded. Tunger truly deserves your reputation as a talented young lady. Only you could think of something this earth-shaking. That reputation is only a joke exchanged among young women, and is hardly worth taking seriously. Father, this method will implicate many people. One wrong move and we may provoke public anger. But if the Gu family intends to stain the Chancellor's reputation, we cannot be the only ones who suffer. Exactly. Why should only our Ning family be unlucky? Slandering the legitimate daughter of the Chancellor's household as unchaste is already shocking enough. Since things have gone this far, we might as well make them bigger and muddy the water completely. Father threw back his head and laughed, then immediately left the room. He intended to submit a memorial and seek an audience to discuss the matter in advance. Sixie, standing behind me, asked anxiously, "Young lady, will His Majesty really agree to this?" I remained still for a long time, watching Father's retreating back. He will. From the scattered information I knew about this story, the Emperor in this book was secretly authoritarian and unhinged. On the surface, he appeared generous and tolerant. He did not force commoners to avoid using the characters in his personal name, nor did he forbid people from writing stories or creating adaptations that portrayed him in all kinds of ways. Because of this, people praised him as a good emperor. But his true personality was nothing like the mild exterior he showed the public. He was the son of the late empress and had lost his mother when he was young. The current Empress Dowager had not given birth to him, only because she had no child of her own did she later adopt him. A motherless child who had never been favored by the late emperor, even though he held the legitimate status of an imperial prince, had faced a precarious path. Otherwise, his position as crown prince would have been taken from him long ago. There was even an old rumor among the people that the late empress had been murdered, and that the current emperor, as a child, had witnessed his mother's horrific death with his own eyes. The tale sounded so bizarre that few believed it. Only I, someone who had transmigrated into the book, knew the rumor concealed the truth. After a childhood like that, even the most ordinary person would have found it hard to avoid becoming twisted and gloomy. And after ascending the throne, the emperor had to endure constant restraint from the entire civil and military bureaucracy. That made him appear mild and patient on the outside while storing violent impulses within. Eventually, those contradictions and pain spilled into behavior that defied conventional morality. For example, he had once abruptly announced that he wanted to bring a woman who had recently given birth into the palace as a consort. Despite fierce opposition from both court and harem, and despite the risk of confusing the imperial bloodline, he insisted on doing it. His relationship with the current Empress Dowager was also poor in reality. He merely showed her respect on the surface while simultaneously dividing the power of the inner palace by elevating another woman, Consort Jiang, a former consort of the late emperor who had once been unfavored, and was now Dowager Consort Jiang. To display her anger, the Empress Dowager announced that she would leave the palace to worship the Buddha. In reality, she stirred up public opinion, subtly implying that the emperor was unfilial in hopes of forcing him to humble himself and invite her back. Yet after 5 years, she still had to return quietly, resume her struggle against Dowager Consort Jiang, and pretend nothing had ever happened. An emperor so sensitive, suspicious, rebellious, and erratic should have been impossible to understand. How had he managed to maintain a reputation among the people for tolerance and generosity? The only explanation I could infer was that he possessed an intense need to pursue and affirm his own identity. My proposal would allow him both to suppress the civil officials and to show off his individuality, leaving an indelible mark on history. It might not be a favorable mark, but it would certainly be unprecedented. I believed he would agree. Even so, the emperor's nature truly ran against ordinary morality. His earlier decision to take a woman who had already given birth into the palace as a consort proved it. He had not even cared about something as serious as potentially confusing the royal bloodline. His tolerant exterior was clearly false. Underneath it, he was a rare madman. "He will agree," I said calmly. The next day, as expected, Gu Chen raised the old matter again and demanded that Ning Chutong, legitimate daughter of the left chancellor's household, prove her innocence before the world. The emperor responded that there was no problem with that. Very well. Then we shall send an experienced palace matron to examine her. Immediately, another minister stepped out to object. This plan is unsuitable. The chancellor's household is powerful. What if the left chancellor has already bribed the matron or secretly coerced her into saying whatever he wishes? Would that not deceive your majesty and constitute the crime of misleading the sovereign? The surrounding ministers nodded in agreement. Hearing such baseless accusations, father would certainly have exploded with anger if I had not discussed this with him beforehand and prepared him mentally. He had done absolutely nothing, yet they had already shoved the charge of deceiving the sovereign onto his head. These bastards could kill a person without a blade, inventing crimes with nothing but their tongues. Infuriating, hateful, despicable. Father gripped the jade court tablet in his hand and repeated silently to himself, "Do not argue right and wrong with fools. Do not argue right and wrong with fools." Because the emperor had already discussed the matter with father the day before, he showed no panic at the questions. He merely pretended to hesitate and think. Then he suddenly smiled brightly. If that is the case, then have all the unmarried young ladies in the households of the ministers brought together for examination. Dead silence. Everyone stared with mouths open, and for a moment no one spoke. At first, the ministers thought they had misheard. Only when the emperor repeated himself did the awful truth finally sink in. They had not misheard. Had the emperor gone mad? Before the ministers recovered from their shock, the emperor seized the opportunity to speak. First, he said that demanding an intimate examination of a noble young lady, based solely on Guchen's one-sided accusation, violated proper etiquette. However, since Guchen held the office of remonstrance counselor and had formally raised the question, the emperor could not simply ignore it. After consideration, he had decided that examinations were acceptable, but they could not be limited to the legitimate daughter of the chancellor's household. Guchen had made an accusation that harmed another family's daughter's reputation. Therefore, he too must present the unmarried daughters of his own household for examination. As for the other ministers who agreed with Guchen and believed his behavior proper, they would do the same. Every unmarried girl in their families would undergo examination as well. The instant those words fell, the imperial court filled with cries of despair. The officials who had watched yesterday's spectacle and delighted in someone else's misfortune finally understood what it meant to share the same suffering. Standing at the front, father stroked his beard and slowly sighed out a line. "Today my body returns to its native soil. Tomorrow yours will be the same." In other words, those who laugh at others today will be laughed at tomorrow. The nearby ministers shuddered when they heard him. Those who had been named could not bear it anymore. They dropped to their knees together, crying out for mercy and begging His Majesty not to implicate innocent daughters in their homes. Some even turned on Guchen, condemning him for improper conduct, and accusing him of spending every day staring at the skirts of unmarried young women, shameful beyond words. The emperor looked with satisfaction at more than half the court crying and complaining, then smiled brilliantly. "Do not worry. We shall also arrange for a number of palace maids who have not yet reached marriageable age to undergo the examination with them. During the process, every girl must cover her face with a silk veil and is forbidden to communicate with the others, or it will be treated as cheating. Furthermore, not one but several matrons will supervise, ensuring no mistakes occur." The ministers cried in unison for His Majesty to withdraw the decree, but the emperor would not budge. One stubborn official tried to argue, only for a colleague to cover his mouth and force his head down while whispering fiercely, "Shut up! Do you want this to get even bigger?" The emperor said calmly, his tone full of deeper meaning. "We merely wish for our ministers to understand what it means to lead by example. If one may accuse another without evidence and impose a crime as vast as heaven through a single statement, then this is no longer justice. It is harming others. In our court, we do not wish to see civil and military officials who know only how to harm people and not how to accomplish real work. The matter is decided. Court is dismissed." After the emperor finished, the ministers were stunned, inwardly screaming without end. "You lunatic emperor, what right do you have to stand there and say such righteous things? You have done so many outrageous things yourself that even you cannot remember them all, and now you are using this excuse to suppress us?" The ministers ground their teeth in fury, but the emperor was immensely pleased. He rattled off his words like firecrackers, ignored the miserable wailing behind him, and returned to the inner palace with a light step. Such an entertaining matter required careful discussion with the empress. They needed to design a detailed, flawless examination procedure so that no one could challenge it afterward. He wanted those troublesome ministers to understand that when it came to being a madman, no one took it more seriously than he did. Half a month later, the examination ceremony that filled the officials with despair officially began. This examination was overseen by the Empress together with 4 virtuous imperial consorts. The matrons performing the inspections belonged to 5 different factions and supervised one another, making bribery or falsification nearly impossible. At the same time, the emperor sent a group of trusted female officials under his direct authority, accompanied by 5 teams of palace maids, to supervise and maintain order. The examinations were arranged at the Palace of Selected Maidens. Outside it, eunuchs stood with their backs turned, forming a human wall to prevent any villain from climbing the walls and peeping inside. Palace maids guarded the base of each wall to keep intruders from slipping in. Every girl undergoing examination had to register beforehand, personally write her own name and her parents' names, then provide a full set of fingerprints for later comparison. If 2 girls shared the same name, they could still be distinguished clearly. Even twin sisters could not be mixed up. The registration lists were controlled by the emperor's trusted female officials and absolutely forbidden from being leaked. Even the empress and the 4 imperial consorts overseeing the process could not interfere with them. Each girl had to wear a face veil, a wide-brimmed hat with a hanging veil, and standardized clothing that concealed nearly the entire body. During the examination, only the necessary area would be exposed. In fact, many noble girls burst into tears the moment they saw the strange, tightly covering garment, whose trousers had only a single opening at the bottom. They had been pampered like precious jade since childhood and had never suffered humiliation like this. They were treating us like livestock. We have no dignity at all. The noble girls waiting in the Palace of Selected Maidens courtyard clustered into little groups and wept miserably. This is all Gu Chen's fault. He refused to mind his own business and insisted the left chancellor's legitimate daughter was unchaste, so now all of us have to suffer. It's ridiculous. The left chancellor's daughter stays in her residence except when she attends noble ladies' gatherings, and that day she returned home before nightfall. How could she have been kidnapped by bandits, captured in daylight and released by night? What kind of ridiculous story is that? If you are going to fabricate something, at least prepare the script first. Exactly, and whether the left chancellor's daughter is pure has nothing to do with him. She wasn't going to marry into the Gu family anyway. I heard the Gu family's daughters must be examined too. Which ones are they? Where are they? Find them. This young lady needs somewhere to vent her anger. The courtyard became so noisy that it nearly turned into a mass fight. Fortunately, the stern-faced trusted female officials arrived with the supervisory teams to restore order. No shouting on palace grounds. The noble girls were dissatisfied, but did not dare cause trouble. They obediently lined up according to instructions. Anyone who continues whispering will have her name recorded and reported, so the entire civil and military court can hear which family raised a young lady with such poor manners. At those words, the girls shuddered, lowered their heads, and no longer dared glance around or whisper. Seeing the scene finally quiet, the female officials were satisfied. Registration is complete. Examinations begin now. First row, enter inside the hall. More than 10 matrons stood in an orderly line, their hearts filled with anxiety. These matrons belonged to different factions, the empress and 4 virtuous consorts, and each had her own master and position. Yet at this moment all shared the same worry. That intense unease made them unconsciously tighten their grip on their handkerchiefs. The reason was simple. They had just learned that their own granddaughters were among the girls being examined. This was the emperor's decision to guarantee fairness and rigor. It forced every matron to perform her duties with absolute seriousness. Because this involved a young woman's reputation and could not be handled carelessly. Cold sweat from their palms soaked their handkerchiefs. They were truly panicked. Why? Because in reality there was no reliable way to tell which girl was a virgin and which was not. That day, I had specifically emphasized to father that he must follow my plan exactly. Stir the matter up, drag other officials into it, and most importantly, ensure that every granddaughter of every matron participating in the examinations was included on the list. Furthermore, this information absolutely could not be leaked to the matrons in advance. They were to learn it only on the day of examination. Father did not understand why I insisted, but he trusted my judgment and scheming ability, so he complied. The emperor, who treated spectacle as entertainment, naturally agreed as well. Only I knew why this detail mattered so much. The truth was that examining whether a woman was a virgin could not be done accurately at all. There was nothing definitive to inspect and no reliable method. Why? Because hymens came in countless natural forms with no single standard. Moreover, a natural hymen already had an opening. That was completely normal, otherwise, how would menstrual blood pass through? A hymen was also elastic. If penetration was not forceful, and the movement not excessively rough, it might suffer no injury or tearing at all. It could look exactly the same afterward as it had before. Some women were even naturally born without a hymen. Most surprising of all, the tissue could heal on its own. It was part of the body, and self-repair was normal. As long as it had not been completely torn apart, even minor injury or bleeding could heal. Therefore, unless a woman had intercourse frequently, was examined immediately afterward, or had been violently injured and examined before healing, one fundamentally could not determine through inspections who was or was not a virgin. When I had first transmigrated here, the original host had just died. After settling back into the Chancellor's residence, I examined my own body. How should I put it? Perfect. Not a trace of injury remained where it mattered. If the original host had been fully mature and the assault had not been so rough, she might not even have bled. After returning to the Chancellor's residence, I therefore devoted myself to treating my injuries. The only visible proof that this body had been violated was the bruising and grip marks across it. Yet after a month of persistent ointment and careful care, every one of those marks had completely disappeared. If they had arranged an examination on the very first day I returned, there might still have been some traces to inspect. But now, no matter who examined me, I would appear to be a perfectly untouched virgin. The palace matrons who performed these inspections were experienced women, but their experience mostly relied on observing, listening, questioning, and touching. Among these, questioning was especially important to their judgment. In other words, they interrogated the girls. These matrons often used clever leading language to make the person reveal a flaw. But those clever questions could easily produce false judgments. Under intense pressure, even a completely innocent person could look unnatural. More importantly, these matrons often judged according to the prevailing mood. If everyone present believed a woman had lost her chastity, the matrons were highly likely to agree that she was no longer pure. So this so-called bodily examination was, in reality, filled with deception and ambiguity. That was exactly why the matrons were now breaking out in a cold sweat. First, the interrogation method they relied on was unusable because conversation was strictly forbidden at the site, lest identities be revealed and fairness compromised. Second, they could not rely on physical features to identify anyone because all the girls wore identical clothing and everything except the necessary area was covered. Third, even if they wanted to follow the prevailing mood, they could not even tell which girl was Ning Chutong. How could they simply echo everyone else's judgment when they did not know whom they were judging? And finally, their own granddaughters were mixed into this crowd. Even if one of them wanted to preserve her professional reputation by casually declaring a girl unchaste, how would she dare when she might accidentally condemn her own family? What if she picked the wrong one and ruined her own granddaughter? The matrons were truly caught in an impossible bind. They did not dare request permission to interrogate the girls either. If they asked, some madman would certainly question why they had to use words rather than direct inspection. How could they answer then? Were they supposed to admit honestly? Sorry, but looking alone tells us nothing. If we question them for a while, perhaps we can trick one or two into exposing themselves. If they dared say that, they would not need to continue living in the palace. They might as well be dragged out and buried alive. Thinking that a wrong step could implicate their entire families, the matrons trembled. Just then, the first row of girls slowly entered. That morning's court session was extraordinarily tense. The hall was silent, not a single minister speaking as everyone waited for news from the inner palace. Before long, a young eunuch entered and reported, "Your Majesty, the count is complete. Every girl on the list is present. They have been divided into 10 rows. The first row has begun entering." As he spoke, the young eunuch presented the registration list. The emperor took it, casually set it aside without opening it, and waved the eunuch away. Hearing that the examinations had begun and the first row had entered, the ministers below became so nervous, they secretly wiped away sweat. Who knew whether their own daughters were in that first group? After roughly the time it would take to drink 2 cups of tea, the eunuch finally returned to report. "Your Majesty, the first row has been examined, and the result? All are untouched." "Very good." Hearing that, the ministers breathed a little easier, and their clenched teeth gradually relaxed. They continued waiting. After about another 2 cups of tea's worth of time, the eunuch returned. Your Majesty, the second row has been examined. All are untouched. Very good. The emperor waved him away in satisfaction. This repeated again and again. Every report said the same thing. Pure, pure, all pure. The ministers gradually relaxed. The normal time for court had long passed, yet not one official left. They all remained standing there and waited. By the time the eunuch entered yet again to report, the familiar answer was still the same. All are untouched. A clearly audible sigh of relief swept through the court. Looking closely, everyone was secretly wiping sweat except the left chancellor at the front, who remained perfectly composed and at ease, completely unlike the tense officials around him. The emperor smiled. Beloved minister, we see your expression has not changed from beginning to end. You must have great confidence in the children of your household. Father raised his head proudly, then bowed with modesty. Your Majesty praises me too highly. Though I am no great talent, I have always considered my household upright and clean. In particular, my eldest daughter is intelligent and dignified. She would certainly never do anything improper or betray imperial grace. Good, very good. The emperor clapped and laughed, then immediately issued a decree granting Ning Chutong, eldest daughter of the Ning family, the title of Commandery Princess Qingping, together with a household fief, 100 taels of gold, a coral, jade treasure, a jade ruyi scepter, and 1 dao of luminous pearls. An old unit of volume. Father immediately knelt to give thanks, crying loudly, "Long live your Majesty!" The other officials looked at him with envy, but no one dared say more. This examination crisis had truly terrified the entire court. Looking at the civil and military officials shrinking like quail, with none of their usual noisy aggression, the emperor smiled in satisfaction again. The decree naming me Princess Qingping was sent to our residence. That afternoon, Father returned beaming and led the entire family to kneel and thank the emperor for his grace. I accepted the imperial decree while wave after wave of bestowed treasures was carried into my courtyard, and the eunuch messenger respectfully addressed me as Your Highness. Madame Chen's mouth twisted with rage, but she could do nothing. After I saw the eunuch off, Father immediately summoned me to his study. I did not go at once. Holding the imperial decree, I slowly walked over to Madame Chen and smiled faintly. Mother, your daughter has been made a commandery princess. Aren't you happy for me? Madame Chen gripped her own daughter's arm tightly and said nothing. She only glared at me with bitter resentment. My smile grew brighter. After enjoying her furious expression until I had seen enough, I turned and headed toward Father's study. The moment I entered, Father clapped and laughed. Tunger, you truly are Father's extraordinary strategist. The court officials' reactions, His Majesty's thoughts, the balance of interests in the inner palace, you held all of it in your palm. Truly brilliant, truly brilliant. After this affair, not only has the Ning family's reputation suffered no damage, but we have won His Majesty's favor as well. Before the Emperor, you have truly brought honor to the Ning family. Ha! Let those old men be jealous. Who told them they couldn't give birth to a daughter as talented and dazzling as my Tunger? I lowered my head with a smile and said nothing. Father happily laughed by himself for a while. Only then did he realize I had been standing for quite some time. He hurriedly pulled out a chair and helped me sit. You've been standing so long, aren't you tired? Sit from now on. Before Father, you need not observe so many formalities. Thank you for granting me a seat, Father. I quickly stood and bowed to him before sitting again. Seeing how careful I was, Father laughed. Honestly, but you are right. You are Princess Qingping now. Every movement can be scrutinized, so caution is good. The other children in the family should learn from you. If they had half your intelligence and self-control, Father would have nothing more to worry about. I nodded. Father is right. Tunger also has something to discuss with you. Go ahead. Father gestured for me to speak freely while walking toward the tea table to pour tea for me. Father, the matter of my chastity has now been settled. Gu Chen can no longer stir trouble over it, but we have already become enemies with the Gu family. If we do not uproot them completely, there may be endless trouble later. Father's busy back paused briefly, then his unconcerned voice came. Tunger need not worry. That shameless Gu man is only a 5th-rank official. Father! I am afraid the power behind the Gu family is not so simple. I accepted the tea Father handed me and took a small sip. Not long ago, when I was taken by bandits, can Father guess what Mother's family did besides killing the entire stronghold? Father frowned. What else? They searched the bandit stronghold and found these letters. I placed before him the evidence proving Gu Chongqing's collusion with the bandits. Father read the letters one by one, his brows drawing tighter with every page. Something is wrong. How could the Gu family? Exactly. No matter how one looks at it, the Gu family does not seem capable of supporting a large bandit stronghold. Gu Chen's official salary would barely support his own household, much less an entire den of bandits. Someone is behind the Gu family. Father's gaze turned colder. I nodded. Yes, and that person is certainly not insignificant at court. Counting on one's fingers, there are only a few possibilities. I raised my head and met Father's cold, wary gaze with meaning. We need to plan one step ahead. Father considered the matter for 3 full days before summoning me back to the study. Tong'er, there is currently no open sign of a struggle over the crown prince's position. If we rush in and choose a faction, the risk is too great. Father thinks this matter should be set aside for now. I was not surprised. This old father of mine had always loved to perform as a hostless, loyal minister in front of others. I said nothing more and instead led him to my courtyard. In the garden stood a pot containing 2 plants. Father, please look. Father glanced at it with confusion. What are you growing? What they are does not matter. I pointed to the pot and said solemnly, what matters is that this pot can only contain 1 plant. The other will inevitably be eliminated. For now, I am only waiting for them to compete for nutrients in the soil, waiting for them to decide which is stronger. When that happens, I will remove the weaker one so the stronger plant can possess the entire pot. Father obviously understood what I meant. Angry at my audacity, he could not help glaring at me coldly. I remained unmoved and continued, Father, from the moment I planted the second plant, the competition began. And as they grow, that competition will only become fiercer. Father, please think carefully. It is easy to add flowers to brocade, to support someone already prospering, but difficult to deliver charcoal in a snowstorm, when help is truly needed. After speaking, I bowed and turned away. Father stood before the pot, staring silently at the 2 plants for a long time. 3 days later he summoned me again. This time he spoke as soon as we met. Tong'er is right. The struggle began long ago. It simply has not been made public. But if we wait until the conflict reaches its peak before joining, there may be no place left for us. I smiled without saying anything. This old man truly knew how to perform. He had already been secretly contacting the 3rd prince for some time, and had even planned to form a marriage alliance with him. Even that old fox Gu Chen knew about it. Yet in front of me, Father still insisted on pretending he was a purely loyal minister. To make him speak openly, I had reasoned with him, used the potted plants as a metaphor, schemed and calculated carefully, and waited 6 whole days. Even now he was still acting. Father, what you did not know was that I had already seen through the nature of a gambler like you. Yet you still put on a troubled, tormented expression before me. But this situation is extremely unclear. Every clan is observing. Choosing a faction carelessly is very dangerous. Where should we begin? Watching him act, I sneered inwardly. In truth, he had another choice. Refuse to take part in the struggle and become a genuinely loyal minister. But as a loyal minister, he would face a very likely outcome. When a new emperor ascended the throne, the new dynasty would promote the officials who had followed and supported him as its pillars. Father, who had remained loyal by refusing every faction, might easily earn the new emperor's resentment and be pushed out of the left chancellor's position. After all, an emperor capable of tolerating and valuing truly loyal ministers had to be an exceptionally enlightened ruler. And how many enlightened rulers had history ever produced? Father did not dare gamble that the new emperor would be one. Once he was pushed out of court, the Ning family would fall from extreme wealth and honor into hardship. Former colleagues with old grudges, people like Gu Chen, might even become his superiors and grind him beneath their feet. How could Father tolerate that? He could not. He did not even dare imagine it. Therefore, he had to enter the struggle. More than that, he had to win. See, human nature was that easy to grasp. The road a person chose was decided by character. Tong'er, then tell Father where we should begin for the safest result. Seeing me silent in thought, Father pressed again. I came back to myself, looked up and smiled gently. Father, marry me into the Gu family. I knew Father would think I had gone mad, but he had survived officialdom too long and mastered the skill of showing nothing on his face. So although my words shocked him, the mask on his face did not crack. He examined with deep suspicion. I knew exactly what he was thinking. The original host father, this left chancellor, was fundamentally a gambler. He had been born into a noble family, but the family's fortunes declined. The luxury and privilege he enjoyed as a boy vanished during his long years of difficult study as the family collapsed. His first wife also died. A peerless beauty like my mother was beyond the reach of ordinary people. Only the truly wealthy and powerful could possess such a peony. Once Father was no longer among the privileged, A flower raised on wealth and splendor like mother could not continue to survive. Her death also symbolized the disappearance of the rich life father had enjoyed and taken for granted since childhood. Therefore, he had no time to grieve for her, because he knew he could not endure poverty. He had to find a way to climb back to his former position as quickly as possible. But in this man-eating society, class boundaries were rigid. Once a person fell, how could he easily climb back? Father's only way to return quickly to wealth and privilege was to gamble, not with money in a gambling house, but with his entire life. He chose Madame Chen, daughter of an immensely wealthy family in Hangzhou, and bet everything on her. He won. Madame Chen was a woman blinded by love. She could clearly have kept her husband under control and prevented him from soaring beyond her reach. She could have held him in her palm and forced him to spend his whole life pleasing her. Instead, she poured the full power of her family into supporting him, enabling him to become left chancellor before the age of 50. She paid everything. Yet the husband she had helped rise to power received her devotion without giving her the respect and love she deserved. In his eyes, all his present power and wealth existed because he had gambled and won, not because someone had lovingly given them to him. Father had won, and he believed it was his own ability, unrelated to Madame Chen's love. Gamblers were frightening. More frightening than a gambler was a gambler who had once won big, and more frightening still was a gambler who had won too many times, so many that he had crossed the limits of his original social class. That was why my nominal father had become accustomed to gambling and even deliberately sought opportunities to do it. His intelligence, his aristocratic roots from years past, and most importantly, the financial backing of Madame Chen's family had ensured that not one of his gambles failed for decades. Father's path had actually been extraordinarily smooth, with almost no true hardship. Because of that, he firmly believed that gambling was right. Gambling was necessary and he had to keep gambling. If he won this time, the Ning family could become part of the imperial clan. After all, he had already attained both a marquisate and the chancellorship, yet human greed was endless. Father had already reached the peak of political power, but naturally he wanted to climb one level higher. Just as princes inevitably fought for the throne, if he wanted to step into the imperial family, he needed a good stepping stone and a suitable chess piece. Years ago, that stepping stone had been Madame Chen. Now it was me. From the moment I displayed an intellect far beyond the other children, Father began to understand that I was different. He realized I could become a far more valuable piece. At first, perhaps I had been nothing more than a pawn in his eyes. Now I had become a rook. A pawn could only become a secondary consort, but a rook might reach the position of empress. The gambler's heart in Father began itching again, his blood heating with impatience. He wanted to wager on the realm, on the supreme throne, on the possibility that the next crown prince would be born from my womb. That thought made his blood boil. So how could he allow an important rook like me to fall into misery by marrying into the Gu family? He was still waiting to use this rook to sweep across the board. I did not immediately explain why I wanted him to marry me into the Gu family. First, I went to the tea table, poured him a cup myself, respectfully brought it over, then stood behind him and massaged his shoulders with just the right pressure. Father, didn't Lord Gu say at court that you had close ties with the third prince, and wanted to marry your daughter to him? You must already have privately sounded out the third prince, haven't you? Father gave no reaction to my probe. His breathing remained even, as though he had fallen asleep. I continued massaging his shoulders and continued speaking. His Majesty has repeatedly delayed naming a crown prince simply because none of the current princes is someone he truly wants to choose. The court officials have long clashed fiercely with him over the succession. So many officials have been punished for pressing him to appoint a crown prince that they cannot be counted. More than one or two have been beaten and dragged away. If, at this sensitive moment, you marry me to the third prince, the man most strongly supported by the court, whether as his principal consort or a secondary consort, it will mean you have openly placed yourself against His Majesty. Father, what happens to a left chancellor who loses imperial favor? Your predecessor and the predecessor before him are living examples. The hand Father had resting on the table trembled slightly. I smiled. So Father must choose a side, but we cannot openly oppose His Majesty at such a sensitive time. We need to change our approach and act from the shadows. Go on, Father finally said. I thought to myself that this old fox truly would not make a move until he saw a sure prize. At least now he was finally willing to discuss what actually mattered instead of pretending. I stopped massaging his shoulders and sat opposite him. Father, Do you know who stands behind the Gu family? Father remained silent, but his gaze turned dark and frightening. Clearly, he was reviewing every suspect in his mind. I gave him the answer directly: the Duke of Zheng, the third prince's maternal uncle. Father's expression did not change, but a layer of gloom settled over his face. He had obviously suspected the Duke of Zheng before. Do you have proof? Father stared at me. He was not doubting the answer. He wanted something concrete. I nodded. The proof has already been handed to you. The letters between Gu Changqing and the bandits are the proof. What do you mean? The paper Gu Changqing used for those letters is Bailu Xuan paper made by Jinlong Hall in Jingzhou. Bailu Xuan is made using Jinlong Hall's secret process. It is thin and light, soft yet tough, white as snow and naturally fragrant. Because it is pure as jade, allows the brush to glide smoothly, and renders the ink crisp and clear. It has long been designated an imperial tribute and is reserved exclusively for members of the imperial family. Father frowned, took the letters from the hidden compartment in his bookshelf, and held them up to the light. Sure enough, they were written on Bailu Xuan paper. Father tossed the letters onto the desk with a cold laugh. I arranged them neatly and continued slowly. In the past 6 months, Bailu Xuan paper has left the palace only once. At the Plum Blossom Banquet, His Majesty bestowed 10 stacks upon the third prince. Many people know this, it is not a secret. So if Gu Changqing could use Bailu Xuan paper, it can only be because the third prince privately rewarded him with it. But why would Gu Changqing use such paper in a situation like this? Because he did not dare use it publicly. Bailu Xuan is too distinctive. Yet Gu Changqing is the kind of man who cannot bear doing anything without showing it off. His vanity made him unable to resist using Bailu Xuan when corresponding with the bandits, a secret way to flaunt the exalted connections behind him. Father pondered, then shook his head. Not necessarily. Many nobles in the palace possess Bailu Xuan. Someone else might have given it to Gu Changqing. Impossible. I picked up the thin paper, brought it close to my nose and inhaled lightly. The paper His Majesty granted the third prince was not ordinary Bailu Xuan. It was an improved variety called Luhuang Xuan. The greatest difference is that Luhuang Xuan contains gold leaf and ambergris. Hearing this, Father instinctively lifted one of the letters and smelled it. But he knew little about fragrances, and could not determine whether the faint scent was truly the legendary smell of ambergris. He looked at me with a trace of doubt. I smiled calmly. Of course, this small amount of ambergris is nothing to the third prince, but using such valuable tribute paper to reward a trusted subordinate is enough to show the regard he holds for him. I tore a small piece from the blank edge of one letter, lit a candle, and held the paper over the flame. As soon as it heated, an elegant fragrance rose from it and spread through the room, lingering without fading. That distinctive scent completely convinced Father. It really is ambergris, which means the Gu family has indeed been connected to the third prince for a long time. Father's face remained calm and still, but I knew fury had already erupted inside him. Father had always been the kind of man who wanted those he loved to live and those he hated to die. The Gu family had dared frame and disgrace the Ning family. Father must have wanted to destroy them for a long time. He simply had not expected them to secure the powerful patron he had been hoping to back before he could. What rotten luck! Then the person behind the bandits who abducted you and tried to destroy your chastity was the third prince. Father's index finger tapped rhythmically on the stack of letters. I sat silently beside him and said nothing more. I had said enough. I trusted Father to make his decision. The uproar caused by the mass examinations of noble girls had only just subsided when the capital erupted again. The reason was that the eldest daughter of the left chancellor's household, the newly titled Princess Qingping, insisted on lowering herself by marrying into the Gu family. Such infatuated foolishness was unheard of. For a time, the entire capital buzzed. Everyone discussed it so excitedly that spittle flew from their mouths, afraid the person beside them might somehow have missed this shocking, colorful scandal. Every large and small restaurant and tavern in the capital filled with people talking about the affair. Which Gu family is this? The same Gu family that questioned the princess's chastity. That's right, heavens, has Princess Qingping lost her mind? The Gu family smeared her reputation like that, and she still dares marry them? That's why love is the hardest thing in the world to explain. Gentlemen, you don't know? The Gu family's eldest son, Gu Changqing, is the princess's childhood sweetheart. Handsome, talented, and sweet-tongued. Hasn't he bewitched her so thoroughly that she says she will marry no one but him? Good heavens, what will happen now? The left chancellor must be furious. Furious? He was so angry he personally went to Remonstrance Counselor Gu's residence and gave him 2 separate beatings, saying Lord Gu didn't know how to raise a son, and that the boy used a sweet tongue and despicable tricks to seduce an innocent young woman. Oh, that's too scandalous to hear. If it's too scandalous, then don't listen. Now hurry up and tell us all the details. My throat's dry from talking. How can I continue without a jar of good wine? Waiter, bring wine. Make it the finest daughter's red rice wine in the house. Quickly, the entire capital turned into a crowd of melon eaters. Spectators who lived for gossip, scratching their heads and eagerly waiting every day for the next installment, feasting on the latest rumors with delight. Why was this particular melon so irresistible? Because it was not only sensational, it kept getting new updates. Today, Princess Qingping insisted on marrying into the Gu family. Tomorrow, the Left Chancellor personally stormed Remonstrance Counselor Gu's residence and beat him. The day after that, Princess Qingping knelt and begged father to approve the marriage, making the Left Chancellor so furious that he fainted on the spot. Terrified, Princess Qingping clung to father and cried loudly that she would not marry. She would not marry anymore. The next day, Gu Changqing and the elders of the Gu clan came to the Chancellor's residence to propose and knelt to beg the Left Chancellor to agree. The result? The Left Chancellor chased them straight out with a broom. Good heavens! There was more melon than anyone could finish eating. Far too much. Crunch, crunch. Anything new today? Crunch, crunch. Everyone was practically relying on the latest gossip for daily entertainment. The whole thing was simply too entertaining. The back and forth farce lasted for half a month. Everyone expected the 2 families to summon their clansmen, seize weapons, and fight a decisive battle until blood flowed like a river. Instead, the Left Chancellor finally announced that he could not change his beloved daughter's mind, and had no choice but to swallow his anger and approve the match. Lord Gu, relying on his son's handsome, refined looks and sweet tongue, had successfully held the princess's heart and finally recovered some face. Immediately, households throughout the capital panicked. Families with daughters hurried home to lecture them. Under no circumstances were they to imitate Princess Qingping and become so foolish. Families with sons went home to scold them in disappointment. Look at Gu Changqing. He can even charm a princess, and what about you? You do nothing but loaf around all day and can even find yourself a respectable wife. From the day the engagement was settled, Lord Gu could hardly stop smiling. He grinned from ear to ear at all times. As for the Left Chancellor, of course he refused even to look at them. He merely told Madame Chen to handle the wedding arrangements, and otherwise did not interfere, saying out loud that he would pretend he no longer had such a daughter. Yet people claimed to have seen him in a private room of a tavern drinking and crying miserably. Such a good daughter, why does she insist on marrying that Gu brat? My heart hurts. It hurts so much I can bear it. His mouth said he would consider himself childless, but the dowry kept increasing batch after batch without end. It was prepared entirely to the standard of a 10-mile red dowry. Thus the whole capital came to believe that the Left Chancellor was only good at making harsh threats with his mouth. In truth, he was a father who doted on his daughter beyond imagination and was soft-hearted to the extreme. Everyone also understood my status and importance in father's heart. No one doubted that even after I married, father would continue to cherish me as before. I obtained what I wanted and married Gu Changqing. On our wedding night, Gu Changqing did not enter the bridal chamber for a long time. One older servant after another was sent to bring word, and each returned saying the groom was still drinking with the guests. Once the guests had gradually left and outward appearances had been preserved, I sent the messengers away, washed, changed into comfortable clothes, and lay down to rest. Sixi and Wanzi were so angry at the worthless groom that they nearly bit through their handkerchiefs. I laughed silently inside while keeping a calm face. I only told Sixi and Wanzi to go rest and leave one maid on night watch. There was no reason to become angry over something already expected. Gu Changqing knew I was not pure. He must have felt disgusted by it and naturally would not treat me kindly. Besides, he had never held any real affection for me. All those sweet words before, even letting father chase him 3 streets with a broom while refusing to abandon the marriage, had been for profit alone. Now that he had married me, he no longer needed to pretend. He did not even bother entering my room on our wedding night. Clearly, he wanted to establish dominance from the start. He truly was a descendant of the Gu family, a whole clan of black-hearted people. I pulled the quilt over myself, put on an eye mask, and slept peacefully while the pair of dragon and phoenix wedding candles burned brightly and filled the room with light. The next morning, Gu Changqing pushed open the door smelling strongly of alcohol. By then, everything in my room had already been arranged. I was reclining comfortably on a small couch, reading while nibbling fruit. He turned toward the window, saw the sun already high and bright, then looked at my relaxed posture and frowned until his brows nearly knotted. Chutong, why aren't you properly dressed and groomed yet? Look what time it is. We still need to greet father and mother. I glanced at him and smiled gently. Husband, to hear is no need to worry. I have already greeted father-in-law and mother-in-law, and I successfully received the household management token from mother-in-law. Everything there has been handled. Then, as if remembering something, I added with concern, if husband is tired, you can go back to your room and rest more. I will have a maid prepare a bowl of soup to help you sober up. You've already gone? He seized on the key point, stunned. How can a new bride go greet her parents-in-law alone? Where does that leave me? And the household management token? How could mother hand it to you the moment you met? I smiled, set down the half-eaten fruit, wiped my mouth with a handkerchief, then picked up the household token from the table and waved it lightly before him. Husband was dead drunk last night and did not even come to the bridal chamber. You must have been exhausted. How could I dare disturb your sweet dreams? Besides, mother is very pleased with me. She eagerly handed me the household token and said, the Gu family's affairs will be entrusted to me from now on. I could hardly fail to live up to the affection mother has shown me as her daughter-in-law. So I have summoned the household servants and am about to assign their duties and begin arranging next month's pufferfish banquet. Just then, Sixie stepped forward at the perfect moment to report, Your Highness, the estate stewards, account keepers, and managers from several shops are already waiting in the courtyard for your instructions. I nodded. Then let's go. Wanzi saw me rise and immediately brought over my outer robe, helping me put it on. I straightened my clothes and walked outside. As I passed Gu Changqing, I kept a gentle smile and spoke warmly. Husband has always been as elegant as moonlight. There is no need for you to trouble yourself with such trivial matters. You have me, rest assured. Gu Changqing could only stare after me. The ordinary household management of the Gu family hardly required someone as formidable as me. Sixie alone could handle it neatly. More than once I had hugged Sixie and told her, if we were in modern times, you would be at least a department manager in a large company. Supervising dozens of people would be nothing to you. Sixie did not understand my modern words, but she was always delighted by my affection. Sharing your highness burdens is this servant's duty. Under Sixie's supervision, preparations for the pufferfish banquet began on a grand scale. Pufferfish banquets were currently fashionable in the capital. Although news occasionally spread of diners dying from pufferfish poisoning, the fish's extraordinary flavor made it irresistible. As a result, cooks skilled at preparing pufferfish commanded increasingly high wages. I had abundant money, so I hired 5 specialist pufferfish chefs at once, each with more than 10 years of experience. I spared no silver in treating them generously, asking only that in 1 month they help create a dazzling pufferfish banquet famous throughout the capital. When my mother-in-law, Madame Wang, heard how lavishly I intended to spend, she was so delighted that she could not stop smiling. Not only did she hand over the household management token with both hands, she went around boasting, my son is truly blessed to have married Her Highness. Look, is she already arranging a pufferfish banquet? Every great figure in the capital will come to taste it. Everyone believed the Gu family intended to use my status as a springboard to rise higher. On the night of the banquet, the Gu residents hung lanterns and decorations everywhere, lighting the whole courtyard. Musicians played at the gate. A stage had been erected in the courtyard where performers sang opera. Music and voices mixed into a lively roar as guests came and went. I sat in the host seat, smiling and nodding to each arrival. Gu Changqing wanted to drag me to the gate so we could greet guests together, but I refused outright. Someone of high enough status must remain at the banquet to preside over it. Otherwise, when guests enter like headless flies, everything become chaotic? Those words, high enough status, left Gu Changqing with nothing to say. The 5 veteran chefs stood neatly in a row in the middle of the hall, each with his own small cooking station, directly demonstrating exquisite knife work as he prepared pufferfish. The guests watched intently and praised them without end. Meanwhile, other dishes with beautiful color, aroma, flavor, and presentation emerged one after another from the rear kitchen and quickly filled every table. The guests' mouths watered. They could hardly contain their anticipation. The main table where I sat was also full. Most of those seated there were Gu relatives. They cared little about respecting my status as a princess. As soon as dishes arrived, they helped themselves without even offering thanks, while urging the servants to bring out the pufferfish more quickly. Once all 5 chefs completed preparation, they carried the pufferfish dishes to each table. Before serving a table, each chef had to take a bite himself with chopsticks. Naturally, the main table was served first. When the pufferfish arrived, one chef picked up a piece and ate it in front of us. I clearly saw Madame Wang half rise from her seat, obviously wanting to stop him. She thought pufferfish this precious should never be eaten first by servants, allowing that would embarrass the Gu family. With that thought, she boldly glared at me in irritation. I ignored her and signaled Sixie to explain. Sixie spoke clearly. These gentlemen are specialist pufferfish chefs with more than 10 years of experience. To prove that the fish they prepare is safe, each chef will personally taste one bite from the serving. We ask our honored guests for understanding. Only then did Madame Wang realize she had nearly made herself a laughingstock. Her face flushed red as she sat down in embarrassment and dared not speak again. The Gu relatives beside her secretly looked pleased, saying they were enjoying treatment fit for the emperor. I found the comment amusing. Once all the dishes had been served, I was the first person to lift a piece of pufferfish with my chopsticks. Tender flesh, exquisite flavor. Truly a supreme delicacy. I ate with an expression of delight and murmured praise. Seeing me eat without incident, the Gu family immediately rushed to grab pieces with their chopsticks, afraid there would be none left if they moved too slowly. The moment the fish entered their mouths, everyone praised it lavishly. Madame Wang sighed as she ate. No wonder noble people insist on eating pufferfish when the season comes. Even though some die from poisoning, they still want it. You truly cannot blame them. It is simply too delicious. I ate 2 pieces of fish, then set down my chopsticks and began drinking cherry wine I had brewed myself. Seeing this, Madame Wang wanted some, too. I glanced at her and said softly, "This wine was personally brewed by this princess." The implication was that she had no qualification to drink it. Madame Wang pretended not to understand and insisted. I sighed and poured her a cup. "Fine, drink. Who told me I was generous?" Seeing me obediently pour for her, Madame Wang smiled broadly and drained the cup in one swallow. I pretended she had offended me. With a cold face, I randomly picked at 2 more bites of food, then excused myself on the grounds that I felt unwell and needed fresh air in the courtyard. Madame Wang assumed I had left in anger and curled her lips smugly. Though I was a Gu daughter-in-law, I had always overshadowed her, so she had never wanted me present in the first place. I had not strolled in the courtyard for long when a young servant came tumbling toward me in panic, shouting, "Something's wrong. Something's wrong. Someone died." At the time I was strolling and chatting with several officials' wives. None of us liked the noise of the banquet, so after sitting inside for a while we had come out for air. By coincidence, we met and began walking together. When the young servant ran over crying that someone had died, the ladies froze in terror and hurriedly asked, "What happened? Slow down and explain clearly." Tears still streaked the servant's face. He was obviously terrified. "Something terrible happened, Your Highness. Master, Madam, young master, and the Gu clan elders, everyone at the whole table has collapsed." What? I was so shocked that I had no time to think. I gathered my skirts and ran toward the main hall. The ladies immediately followed. By the time I arrived, everyone in the hall had backed away, all eyes fixed on the main table, while whispers spread. I clearly heard someone say, "They must have been poisoned by the pufferfish." The main table was in total chaos. The Gu family members who had been sitting together now lay sprawled on the ground, foam at their mouths. Some convulsed, others lay motionless. Madame Wang died in a particularly miserable posture, all 5 fingers hooked like claws around her husband's clothing. Gu Chen was little better. He clutched his chest as he fell and dragged down the tablecloth, so bowls and plates overturned onto him, covering his body in soup and leftovers. Gu Changqing was strong. When I arrived, he was still breathing, but barely, more breath leaving him than entering. The astonishing thing was that only members of the Gu family had been poisoned. None of the invited guests or the chefs who prepared the pufferfish showed any problem. Everyone stared in stunned silence, not knowing what to do. Terrified, I covered my mouth tightly with a handkerchief and shouted, "Someone come! Call a physician! Hurry!" Servants rushed out to summon doctors. Sixie led others in maintaining order and advised the guests to leave in an orderly way. Many refused, insisting on staying to watch the spectacle. Seeing that, Sixie did not force them. She merely guided them to rest in the courtyard and thoughtfully prepared tea, water, and fruit so they could enjoy watching the commotion in comfort. The guests praised Her Highness endlessly, saying even the maids around the princess were clever and sensible. Before long, several physicians hurried in and were led into the main hall. The guests held tea and fruit as they crowded around the doorway, craning their necks to watch. They personally witnessed the physicians crouch beside the patients and try everything, inducing vomiting, acupuncture, every possible method of rescue. In the end, however, the doctors were helpless. They could only watch the patients breathe their final breaths. They stood, shook their heads at me to show they had done everything possible, and urged me to restrain my grief. I immediately fainted on the spot and fell directly into Wanzi's arms. Your Highness, don't frighten this servant. Physician, quickly examine the princess. Nothing can happen to Her Highness. The guests who had watched from the beginning sighed and exclaimed without end. Not long afterward, constables arrived. They sealed the main hall and no longer allowed guests to crowd the doorway and peer inside. Yet the guests still refused to leave, determined to remain in the courtyard and see the matter through. Many were high-ranking, so the constables did not dare force them out. They simply pretended not to notice as everyone stood outside watching while eating fruit. After I fainted, I was carried out of the hall. Cixi deliberately brought me into the courtyard and used smelling salts to wake me. I weakly came around in full view of the guests eating fruit and watching the show, then burst into miserable sobs. How did this happen? I ate plenty of pufferfish too. Why? Why did this happen? I cried until I could hardly breathe, lamenting my bitter fate, insisting that someone must have secretly poisoned the Gu family, then blaming my mother-in-law, Madame Wang, for refusing to let me arrange every detail of the pufferfish banquet, which allowed something to go wrong without my knowledge. The guests became more fascinated the longer they watched and discussed it animatedly. Before long, the constables and coroners completed their inspection of the scene, exchanged information with the physicians who had attempted treatment, then came out to find me. Exhausted from crying, I saw Captain Lin approach and struggled out of Wanzi's arms to step forward. Captain Lin, someone must have secretly poisoned the Gu family. Please seek justice for them. Captain Lin looked at me with both sympathy and a trace of suspicion. Your Highness, I have several questions. I hope you will answer them. Please ask, Captain Lin. I wiped my tears and replied through sobs. Did Your Highness eat the pufferfish? I nodded weakly. Yes, as the host, I had to be the first to use my chopsticks before everyone else could begin. That is etiquette. The chefs who prepared the pufferfish ate it too, in front of all of us, and nothing happened to them. Cixi immediately confirmed this. Captain Lin continued. Why was there a bowl of sour soup on the main table while none of the other tables had it? My mother-in-law specially requested it as an appetizer. I thought sour soup did not suit a pufferfish banquet, so I only placed it on the main table to satisfy her and did not serve it elsewhere. Did Your Highness taste every dish on the main table? I looked confused and tried to remember. I think I tasted almost everything. Unsure, I turned towards Cixi. She hurriedly said, This servant served food for Her Highness. I served Her Highness from almost every dish. Almost? Captain Lin immediately caught the word. So there was something you did not serve Her Highness? Of course. Her Highness is precious. She cannot simply eat whatever is placed before her, Cixi said proudly. Then what did you not serve her? The sour soup. Cixi's voice grew loud and openly disgusted. Such an elegant pufferfish banquet was meant to be the height of refinement. Her Highness studied every dish carefully so everything would be flawless. Yet who would have expected the old madam to insist on adding a bowl of sour soup to the menu? Captain Lin frowned. What's wrong with sour soup? Sour soup is rough food eaten by commoners in streets and alleys. How could our princess eat something like that? A pufferfish banquet represents the highest refinement. What place does sour soup have there? Her Highness did not want it at all, but the old madam insisted that the master loved it and demanded it. People say filial duty comes before everything. Since both master and madam requested it, naturally Her Highness had to comply. But complying is one thing. Our princess would never eat it. From beginning to end, this servant never served her a spoonful of sour soup. How could Her Highness possibly eat that? I let Cixi speak while lowering my head and weeping in silence. Captain Lin understood. He turned to the constables. The physicians are still here. Have them test whether the sour soup contains poison. Hearing this, I hurriedly said, Captain Lin, every other dish today was prepared by people from my kitchens. Only the sour soup was made by nursemaid Xiao. But nursemaid Xiao has served my mother-in-law for many years and is her trusted attendant. Even if she wished to harm me, she would never harm my mother-in-law as well. Captain Lin said quietly, There may be hidden circumstances. Your Highness, please do not worry too soon. I nodded through my tears. A short while later, a constable returned to report, There is no poison in the sour soup. but the sour soup truly is what killed them. Captain Lin's brows twisted together. Are you trying to give me a riddle? The physicians hurriedly explained. The sour soup contains no powerful poison such as arsenic or any other deadly toxin. However, the soup itself could kill when eaten because it was not fresh. It had spoiled. My face grew even more confused. How could it not be fresh? Nursemaid Xiao cooked it this afternoon. It was served less than 2 hours later. How could it have spoiled? The physicians waved their hands. Even if it was freshly cooked, if the ingredients were already spoiled beforehand, the finished dish would still be unsafe. I turned again toward Sixi. She nodded emphatically. Your Highness, Nursemaid Xiao handled the sour soup from beginning to end. Even the ingredients came from the Gu family's own kitchen. We had no control over it. Captain Lin immediately ordered Nursemaid Xiao brought over and personally went to inspect the Gu kitchen and the way ingredients had been stored. By then, Nursemaid Xiao had cried until her eyes were swollen. She pointed at a corner where a sack of corn sat. This is what I used. This old servant has made the dish for Madam all her life and never once had a problem. The physicians opened the sack. At first glance, the ears of corn looked normal. But when the physicians brought them close to their noses, they caught a faint smell of mold mixed with the odor of decay. There was no longer any doubt. This corn had caused the tragedy. The physicians shook their heads repeatedly. All of this corn has spoiled. Hearing that, I became so furious that I pointed at Nursemaid Xiao's face. You truly are a heartless ingrate. Mother-in-law treated you so well, yet you were stingy enough to refuse to use fresh corn for her sour soup. Someone, drag this vicious woman away. I could not finish. Grief struck my chest so violently that I fainted again into Wanzi's arms. Nursemaid Xiao panicked and dropped to her knees, crying out for mercy. Your Highness, spare this old servant. I have made sour soup for Madam all my life and never made a mistake. This batch of corn was purchased by the estate manager. This old servant already said it was no longer fresh, but the manager said it was only for a bowl of sour soup, so what did freshness matter? The pufferfish banquet had so many fine delicacies. Who would pay attention to sour soup or actually eat much of it? This old servant had no choice. If I had known using stale corn could kill Master and Madam, I would never have touched it even if I had to die. Listening to Nursemaid Xiao's miserable cries, I finally felt at ease and allowed myself to faint completely. Everything after that had nothing to do with me. The cause was a highly lethal toxin associated with spoiled corn products, often found in spoiled fungus, spoiled fresh white fungus, and deteriorated starch foods. See? Killing people could be so simple. The task I had taken on by marrying into the Gu family was complete. Less than a month after I crossed their threshold, my husband's entire family was dead. I was innocent and blameless. Even though their own carelessness had led to food poisoning, I still could not avoid gaining a reputation for bringing death to my husband. After all, this was an ancient world steeped in feudal superstition. I did not care in the slightest. The Gu family hung white mourning banners. Wearing mourning clothes, I stood in the funeral hall before Gu Changqing's coffin and cried until I looked barely human. Husband, how could you be so heartless? You hadn't even consummated our marriage. You didn't leave me so much as a child. How could you abandon me like this? I sobbed and struck the floor, my face filled with agony. Suddenly, a woman's mocking voice sounded above me. So even the noble princess has days when she can keep a man's heart. The corner of my mouth almost curved upward. Taking advantage of my lowered head, I quickly suppressed the expression. When I looked up, my face had returned to gentle confusion, tears in my eyes making me pitiful. Who are you? Before half a day passed, a new scandal had spread everywhere. According to those who came to offer condolences at the Gu residence that morning, a pregnant woman had appeared in the Gu family's funeral hall. She loudly announced that she was Gu Changqing's mistress, kept outside the household, and that the child in her belly was his. She had come to demand a share of the inheritance. Princess Qingping could not refute her. The princess had only recently married into the family and had never consummated the marriage with Gu Changqing, a fact exposed plainly during their confrontation. Even if Princess Qingping wanted to lie and claim she and Gu Changqing had truly lived as husband and wife, the pregnant woman revealed an even more shocking secret. Before marrying the princess, Gu Changqing had already lost the ability to function as a husband. The woman even produced a medical record from a clinic outside the city where Gu Changqing had secretly sought treatment. It clearly recorded that he had once fallen from a horse and suffered a severe injury that left him unable to perform as a man. Seeing the medical record, Princess Qingping's eyes widened and she blurted, "No wonder, no wonder." With the medical record in hand and a private token belonging to Gu Chongqing as additional proof, the child in the woman's belly naturally became the Gu family's only remaining bloodline, leaving Princess Qingping no room to argue. The princess was so furious and wronged that she fainted on the spot. The physician called to treat her said she could not withstand any further shock, or her life could be in danger. When the left chancellor received the news, he could no longer remain seated. He brought his sons and household guards straight to the Gu residence, and forcibly carried the princess back to the left chancellor's residence to recuperate. My daughter has been married into the Gu household for more than a month, yet she remains entirely untouched. Gu Chongqing was fundamentally incapable of fulfilling a husband's duty. This was clearly marriage fraud. This old man will petition His Majesty and ask for an imperial decree dissolving the marriage. As for the Gu family, that filthy, chaotic household is not worthy of my daughter's involvement any longer. From then on, the Gu family began to collapse. Branch relatives packed their belongings one after another and returned to their hometowns. No one in the Gu clan had enough face left to remain in the capital. Within a single month, a family that had once been admired and endlessly discussed quietly declined, as though it had never existed there at all. I handed father every piece of evidence I had obtained from the Gu residence. Looking at the chest filled with documents I had hidden among my dowry and brought back, father wore a satisfied, approving smile. "Tunger, you have worked hard." I did not answer. Father flipped through the documents, a sharp and ruthless light passing through his eyes. "Tunger, prepare yourself. After some time, once the turmoil settles, you will become the crown princess." Father did not explain why he was so certain. I neither contradicted nor questioned him. I merely bowed and left the study. I walked slowly through the courtyard as though strolling and thinking at once, eventually reaching Yunduan Pavilion. At that moment, I happened to meet my younger half-sister coming out of the courtyard. We stopped face to face. I silently looked at her, and she stared back. The moment she recognized me, her originally pretty face darkened like clouds in the sky. A husband, Qinglan Jinx, still wants to return to the left chancellor's residence and act as its legitimate young lady? Aren't you afraid of bringing us more bad luck? Insulting me seemed almost reflexive to her. Then she turned to go back inside and bathe with pomelo leaves to wash away the ill fortune. I called after her. "That husband, Qinglan Jinx, you just mentioned will soon become the crown princess." My half-sister stopped and spun around to glare at me. "Ridiculous, you, a withered flower like you?" I nodded. "That's right. What? Has father gone insane?" Furious, she shoved me hard aside and ran straight toward father's study. Her maid hurried after her but could not keep pace with her greed for wealth and honor, and her desire to become mother of the realm. I laughed. Stirring up these people's greed was truly so easy, so very easy. I watched my half-sister disappear down the corridor, then turned back toward my own courtyard. It was time for the Ning family's play to begin. The Gu family had secretly done many things for the third prince, also concealed that even the emperor had known nothing. Father held a thick stack of evidence showing the third prince had privately recruited troops and purchased horses, yet he did not directly present it to the emperor. Instead, he skillfully created an excuse that caused the third prince to expose one small flaw by accident. Searching for a needle in the sea was difficult. Once a specific direction existed, everything became much easier. Before long, the emperor uncovered the connection between the third prince and the Gu family, and learned about the things the prince had secretly done behind his back. He even discovered that the third prince had deliberately ordered bandits to kidnap the original Ning Chutong. The third prince wanted to marry me as his consort so he could seize the full power of the left chancellor. But to control me, and thereby control the left chancellor, he planned to destroy my chastity first. Once my reputation was ruined, he would step forward and accept me. Even if he granted me only the position of secondary consort, everyone in the chancellor's household would be endlessly grateful, while I myself would become even more moved and absolutely loyal to him. A person who stepped on a victim's pain, blood, and bones to profit was truly disgusting. At first, the emperor did not care much about this particular matter. In his eyes, the third prince had already been secretly recruiting troops and buying horses with rebellious intentions. Adding one more crime did not change much. Although the third prince had such ambitions, he was still young, and so far the forces he had recruited still numbered no more than 10,000. What could he rebel with? So the emperor hesitated, considering how to remove the danger while preserving the third prince as much as possible. But just then, Another storm arose inside the palace. The Empress Dowager suddenly became gravely ill. The entire Imperial Medical Bureau gathered to treat her. Normally, there would have been nothing remarkable about that, but the problem lay in her medical record. Because she was seriously ill, the imperial physicians conducted a full examination and recorded every symptom. When the emperor reviewed the record, he unexpectedly discovered that the Empress Dowager had a large old scar across her back. From the marks, it seemed someone had once used a sharp tool or pointed object to rake her flesh apart. The emperor stood frozen as if struck by lightning. Two figures overlapped in his mind. One was a thin figure from his childhood, who had once fallen from the late emperor's imperial bed, hurriedly clutching disordered clothing while fleeing. The other was the person who had once set fire inside his mother's palace, also thin and frail. The only point shared by those two figures was a striking scar on the back, as though torn apart by a sharp comb. They were the same person. Even without any other evidence, the emperor knew it. The same woman had murdered his mother and had nearly killed him as well. Then, after simply wiping her face clean, she transformed herself into the gentle, benevolent consort Lian, brought him into her palace, and raised him. Using the status of his adoptive mother, she climbed step by step to become Empress Dowager, treading over his mother's blood and bones. She had harmed him, then pretended to be his great benefactor, and enjoyed all his gratitude and protection. How could he endure that? The emperor immediately ordered the imperial physicians to use the strongest medicines possible and wake the Empress Dowager no matter what. He still had far too many questions for her. No one knew what the emperor and the Empress Dowager said that night. All anyone knew was that when he left her chambers, she had suddenly died. Father's spies in the palace reported that there were 2 dark handprints around her neck. She had been strangled to death by someone carrying hatred vast enough to want to snap her neck. The emperor then executed every servant who knew what had happened years ago. In particular, Nanny An, who had always served the Empress Dowager, was sentenced to execution by slow slicing. Father knew every wave moving inside the palace. Then he did exactly what I had once done. He told the third prince, "My beloved daughter is now divorced and bears the stigma of remarriage. Her reputation for chastity has been ruined, and I do not know what future remains for her. I am only an old father who worries over this every day until I cannot sleep." The third prince had no idea that the emperor was already watching him. Hearing father's words, he secretly rejoiced. The very next day, he entered the palace. He asked the emperor to issue a marriage decree joining him and me. In the past, the emperor might have agreed. This time, not only did he refuse to answer immediately, he looked at the son kneeling below with an extraordinarily cold gaze. The third prince said he did not mind that I would be marrying for the second time and was willing to take me as a secondary consort. At once, the emperor remembered what his investigation had uncovered. The third prince had intended to destroy my chastity first, then marry me. He also remembered the Empress Dowager, who had died only recently. They were the same kind of person, people willing to push others into desperation, then play the savior by offering a scrap of kindness and sucking the victim's blood and bones dry. His own son had turned out exactly like the person who killed his mother, equally despicable and ruthless. The pain in the emperor's heart had long gone numb. He looked at the son still talking endlessly below the steps, and slowly closed his eyes. He had made his decision. Members of the third prince's faction were exiled or imprisoned, while the third prince himself was stripped of rank and reduced to a commoner. From then on, he permanently lost any chance of competing for the throne. The emperor acted quickly and decisively, leaving the third prince's faction no chance to react or resist. He had resolved to destroy these people who disgusted him. Sparing the third prince's life was the final fragment of mercy left in him as a father. Beyond that, nothing remained. After finishing with the third prince's faction, the emperor changed his mind and arranged another marriage for me. He wanted to compensate me, as though by doing so he could also make amends to the motherless child he himself had once been. We had both been sacrifices beneath the ambition for power. The emperor betrothed me to the first prince. This was entirely within father's expectations, because he understood the emperor well. After losing the third prince, the emperor could choose only between the first prince and the second prince. By any measure, the first prince, who had also lost his mother when young, was the choice most likely to make the emperor feel at ease. The first prince followed the script father had arranged, step by step toward that position. Half a year later, I married the first prince and legitimately became the first prince's consort. Everyone vaguely sensed that the first prince was now very likely to be named Crown Prince. My younger half-sister visited the first prince's residence almost every day. Every time, she deliberately chose a moment when the first prince was present. I knew exactly what she wanted, and I did not stop her. Instead, whenever she came, I deliberately prepared a plate of fresh raw seafood and placed it on the table. Then I found an excuse to leave, letting the first prince and my half-sister remain together in private. Months passed like this. Finally, one day, both collapsed while embracing each other naked. Imperial physicians came to treat them. Both the first prince and my half-sister vomited continuously and could not even stand. In the end, the physicians failed to save them. They struggled for an entire day and night before dying one after another. I stood outside the door and listened as the imperial physician announced both deaths. My heart was completely empty. E. coli, listeria, botulinum bacteria, salmonella, liver flukes, intestinal flukes, tapeworms, just some of the viruses, bacteria, and parasites that could exist in raw seafood. For people in the ancient world, any one of them might easily cause sudden death. Their deaths were inevitable. All I had done was wait. The first prince's sudden death threw the emperor into a towering rage. After investigating, he learned that the first prince had recently become very fond of fresh marinated raw seafood and often secretly ate it with my half-sister. The two enjoyed it immensely and praised it as a supreme delicacy, eating it repeatedly for months without incident. But this time, both of them died. Had someone poisoned them? A thorough investigation found no poison at all. It was simply that after the marinated seafood had been placed on the table, the first prince and my half-sister did not eat it immediately. Instead, they went to bed and enjoyed themselves first. Several hours later, they finally ate the seafood that had been sitting out all that time. It had spoiled from being left too long, and that was how the two of them died. While they were together in the room, guards had remained stationed outside the entire time. No one had approached. As for my half-sister secretly having an affair with the first prince, I wept before the emperor and explained that I was only a powerless woman. If my husband liked my half-sister, how could I object? I could only go along with my husband's wishes and let him pursue his happiness. It was also because the first prince loved marinated raw seafood that I had people prepare it so often. Who could have expected them not to eat it immediately, and who could have imagined they would enjoy themselves together for so long? Covering my face, I cried miserably until I seemed about to faint. I played the role of a foolish woman who blindly obeyed her husband, had no opinions of her own, and was too ashamed to air family matters in public. I played the role to perfection. The emperor investigated again and again but found no evidence that I had interfered. Moreover, he already had his own informants inside the first prince's residence. Every one of those informants reported that I obeyed my husband wholeheartedly and never dared oppose the first prince. Whatever he said, I listened. Whatever he wanted, I arranged. Even when the first prince and my half-sister had an affair, I did not voice a single objection. I even cared attentively for my half-sister, afraid she might fail to serve the first prince well and affect his mood. Hearing that I could be this foolishly submissive, the emperor finally believed I was innocent. But his own son had died because he secretly slept with a woman and then ate spoiled food. If the truth spread, the manner of death would sound unbearably disgraceful. So the emperor gritted his teeth and buried the first prince under the official explanation of sudden acute illness. I repeatedly cried until I fainted. Before long, I became seriously ill, feverish and delirious, completely unable to return to the first prince's residence to manage the funeral. With no other choice, the emperor kept me in the palace and entrusted me to Dowager Consort Jiang so I could recuperate properly. Dowager Consort Jiang had once been raised by the emperor to stand against the former Empress Dowager. Now that the former Empress Dowager was dead, almost the entire inner palace fell under Dowager Consort Jiang's management. Born into a military family, she was straightforward, decisive, and bold, yet also extraordinarily thoughtful. Once she learned what I had experienced, she pitied me even more and cared for me with great attention. Afraid familiar sights might trigger my grief, she absolutely forbade seafood from appearing in my daily meals, using only pork, chicken, and vegetables to nourish me. Thanks to that, I enjoyed a peaceful and comfortable period in Dowager Consort Jiang's palace. When the late emperor was alive, she had not been favored and had endured a dark stretch of years. Those experiences, together with many years of struggling against the former Empress Dowager, had made her quiet and cautious. She once said she was almost growing moss and rotting away from boredom. My arrival seemed to give her vitality again, as though life once more held a little hope. Dowager Consort Jiang and I got along extremely well, understanding and sympathizing with one another. Gradually, we became as close as a real mother and daughter. Dowager Consort Jiang cherished and cared for me as if I were her own child. I respected and loved her as I would a true mother. We became indispensable parts of each other's lives. Yet just as I was recuperating in peace, horrifying news reached the palace and made the medicine bowl slip from my hand. Father and my stepmother had suddenly died in the Left Chancellor's residence. My face turned pale. My body swayed and I collapsed. The last thing I saw was Dowager Consort Jiang rushing toward me in alarm. When I woke, she was sitting beside the bed, her face heavy as she told me what had happened. Recently, a merchant ship had transported a shipment of sea snails into the capital, using a special preservation method. The snails had a distinctive, wild flavor that was unforgettable after one taste. They quickly became fashionable in the capital, regarded as the latest culinary trend. Naturally, the Left Chancellor's residents followed the fashion as well. They bought some sea snails and fried them over high heat with aromatic spices and strong seasonings, creating a full, tempting platter. Father and my stepmother tasted them and found them delicious, rich, spicy, fragrant, sweet, with tender, juicy meat and an excellent texture. But not long after finishing the entire dish, both began to feel numbness the lips and mouth, then difficulty breathing, before rapidly losing consciousness. Terrified servants hurried to call a physician. By the time the doctor arrived, however, both had stopped breathing. After inspecting the food, the physician repeatedly slapped his thigh and sighed in regret. They accidentally ate patterned sea snails. Once someone eats those, even immortals would struggle to save them. Later, people from coastal regions explained that sea snails were indeed delicious, but only if one did not accidentally eat the toxic patterned variety. These poisonous snails looked almost identical to ordinary edible species, making them difficult to distinguish. Unless one was very experienced, even people who lived by the sea sometimes heard of someone dying after eating the wrong kind. One could only say the Left Chancellor and his wife had been extraordinarily unlucky. After hearing Dowager Consort Jiang's account, a single tear slipped from the corner of my eye. No light remained in my empty gaze. She held my hand tightly and said with sympathy, "It's all right, Tunger. Everything will get better." I did not answer. I merely closed my eyes slowly. Patterned sea snail toxin, a neurotoxin of the same kind as pufferfish toxin. Even deep inside the palace, I could still exchange letters with Father. All I did was occasionally mention in those letters the fresh, delicious seafood dishes usually enjoyed only by the imperial household, including sea snails. Then I asked Sixie's elder brother, who lived on the coast and worked as a fisherman, to quietly mix several toxic patterned sea snails into the batch purchased by the Left Chancellor's residence. Even if Father and Madame Chen did not eat those particular snails directly, cooking them together with the others would spread the toxin into the broth. Eating food soaked in that broth could still poison and kill them. It was that simple. I was far away inside the palace and seemingly powerless to act. On the surface, the tragedy at the Left Chancellor's residence had nothing to do with me. At this point, I had finally completed the original host revenge. Not a single person who had harmed her escaped. I had achieved every step of the plan without suffering any loss myself. I truly was excellent. Although I bore no official responsibility for any of those deaths, I had ultimately become someone with a reputation for terrible luck. Many people believed the Gu family, the first prince, and even my own natal family had all died because of me. In truth, what they believed was not entirely wrong. Carrying such an ominous reputation, I could no longer remain in the palace for long. Before the emperor could say anything, I proactively petitioned to leave the palace and enter Buddhist seclusion, saying that as a person burdened with misfortune, I wished only to devote the rest of my life to Buddhism. Beneath the pure light of temple lamps, I would chant sutras for my deceased relatives, and pray that in their next lives they might be reborn somewhere better. The emperor let out a breath of relief and immediately agreed. Dowager Consort Jiang could not bear to part from me and asked to leave the palace with me. The emperor tried repeatedly to dissuade her, but she said, "I am already old. There is little left for me to fear." Even if something truly inauspicious follows her, beneath the Buddhist protection it surely cannot matter much. The emperor could not persuade her further. Dowager Consort Jiang was no longer an important figure in court politics, so he waved a hand and allowed it. On the road to Dayan Temple, Dowager Consort Jiang and I staged a carriage crash into a deep ravine, creating a scene that suggested our bodies had been destroyed beyond recovery and successfully deceiving the escort guards. When the guards returned to the capital to report to the emperor, Dowager Consort Jiang, Sixi, Wanzi, several trusted attendants, and I had already boarded a merchant ship waiting by the coast. The ship was loaded with the entirety of my vast 10-mile dowry. The instant I stepped aboard, it weighed anchor and sailed toward a distant overseas kingdom. With that much wealth, in one of those small countries I could surely live like a little emperor and dominate a realm of my own. The future looked extremely promising. The end.